Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, but we need 8 commissioners to get started, so we will wait for 2 more. Good evening, and welcome to the July 20th meeting of the City of Des Moines Planning and Zoning Commission. I will read the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission, other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. The applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or a member of the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the July 6th meeting?
I'll move.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion? Please raise your right hand. All opposed? Eagerly awaited. We're voting to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting, please raise your right hand. All opposed?
Yes.
Thank you. And abstentions?
Abstain, I was not here.
Thank you. I will now read through the consent agenda items. Item number 1, consideration of the following proposed city-initiated zoning text amendments. A, an amendment to allow repair, modification, or upgrade of existing utility or public service infrastructure services and equipment as a Type 1 zoning exception. Item B, amendment to allow consumer fireworks sales in districts zoned for commercial use to comply with state law. And item C, an amendment to remove the allowance for alcoholic liquor sales by limited retail sales uses in the RX1 and RX2 districts and by fuel station uses in MX1. Is there anyone in the public who would like to this item moved to public hearing tonight? Anyone on the commission? Item 1 will stay on consent. Item 2, a request from 36 on 6th LLC regarding the vacation of 26 square feet of surface right-of-way and 542 square feet of air right-of-way adjoining properties at 3614 6th Avenue and 3612 6th Avenue to allow the encroachment of an existing building and canopy within the 6th Avenue right-of-way. Is there anyone in the audience who would like this item moved to public hearing tonight? Anyone on the commission? Item 2 will stay on consent. Item 3, a request from the Church of Brethren North Plains District for the following regarding property located at 4100 6th Avenue and 4112 6th Avenue. Item A, determination as to whether the requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM. And B, rezone the northern 50 feet of property from P2 and N3B to N3B to allow the property to be subdivided and used for one household residential use. Is there anyone tonight in the audience who would like this item moved to the public hearing agenda? Anyone on the commission? Item 3 will also stay on consent. Item number 4, a request from Spot Free Car Wash for a review and approval of a public hearing site plan, Spot Free Car Wash Edition, for the property located at 3104 Indianola and for a Type 2 design alternative to waive installation of sidewalks along street frontages. Is there anyone in the audience who would like this moved to public hearing tonight?
If you're wanting to have this discussed, you do want to have it moved to the discussion portion. Because if it stays on consent, the commission will vote to approve it in a blanket vote without any discussion. So item number 1, which was the amendment to the zoning ordinance, that's staying on consent agenda right now, meaning there'll be no discussion on that unless anybody here wanted to have a discussion on that.
But the understanding is, based on what's written, it's being approved, right? To not put the sidewalk in.
That's the staff recommendation, to not put the sidewalk in.
Oh, and that's what we want.
Okay, okay.
Did I ask about the commission? Anyone on the commission for item 4? Okay, item 4 will also remain on consent. There is a request to move item 10 to the consent agenda. Item 10 is a request from Tiger Knight for review and approval of a public hearing site plan, 1210 Army Post Road site plan for property located at the same and for the following type 2 design alternatives. A, to allow a reduction in street-facing transparency when the existing street-facing transparency does not meet the minimum 18% required. And item B, to allow a new garage and loading entrance with an overhead door on the primary frontage facade where this is not permitted. Would anyone in the audience tonight like this to remain on the public hearing agenda? And anyone on the commission? Okay. Item 10 will remain on the public hearing agenda. Could I get a motion to move the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of consent.
Thanks, Todd. All in favor of approval, please raise your right hand.
I approve, except for item number 4, I vote no.
Thank you, Carol. I think that accounted for everyone, right? Okay. We will now move to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting, starting with item number 5.
And if you were here for items 1 through 4, you're able to leave now.
Shauna will present item number 5, a request from 4820 Ingersoll Prop Co. for review and approval of the preliminary plat Waterbury Commons on 0.89 acres of property in the vicinity of 4820 Ingersoll, which would allow for 16 lots for row house development and an outlot.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Shauna Barron, Planning Staff. Tonight, we are rehearing the Waterbury Commons preliminary plat due to an incorrect noticing for the July 6th hearing. The property is located at 4820 Ingersoll Avenue, and the proposal is for 4 4-unit townhomes. Previously, there was an apartment building on the site. It has since been demolished. There are some photos that I took a couple weeks ago of the site. This photo is looking to the south. This photo is looking at the previous driveway entrance at the northwest corner of the site. The preliminary plat is what is before you tonight. This is the plat that was submitted with the utilities. I also want to note that a site plan is currently being reviewed by the planning department. It is not before you for hearing. There are not any type 2 design alternatives, but I will include some of the information as it is, as it pertains to our discussion today for the preliminary plat. This is the grading plan that was submitted with the site plan. And this is the landscaping plan. You can see the layout of the 4 4-unit townhomes. Has the garages tucked in the back with drive access to the west. There is a detention basin on the north end of the site where they will be putting in a rain garden and also street trees. They will be improving the sidewalk for pedestrian access along the street frontage. This is the building elevation that was submitted with the site plan, just so that you can see the design that is before you for the site plan. There are no design alternatives, though, that need to be heard by the Plan and Zoning Commission. They have met all of the city code requirements. Earlier this year, the planned Des Moines future land use designation was revised from a medium density residential, which allowed for 17 units per acre, to a high density residential, which is over 17 units per acre. The The Plan and Zoning Commission recommended approval of that in January, and the council officially approved it in February. The proposed 16 units on these .89 acres represent a net density of 17.98 units per acre, so they are just over the medium density to that high density land use designation. This is the site, or the staff report. And then when this was noticed, there were some emails. A couple of neighbors had emailed some concerns, so I'll leave them here on the screen. Zoom in a little bit so you can read. This is the notice map showing the neighbors that had voiced concerns. In closing, I just want to state that the current density is supported by the current land use designation as well as city code and our zoning ordinance, and staff is in support of this item. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the
I
commissioners?
do, real quick. You mentioned the curb cut. Now, is that the curb cut that's remaining, or?
So they plan to reutilize the area where the curb cut currently exists. They have to realign it slightly in order to keep the turning radius off the neighbor's property.
Okay.
But their intent is to utilize the same general area.
So there'll just be one, and it'll be in about
Just
there?
one, and it will
Okay,
be-
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present? You have 10 minutes to present. Please state your name and address and sign in on the sheet to your right when you're finished.
Hi, good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission. Wally Pelds with Pelds Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. I'm here just to represent the preliminary plat. We have been working hard with staff to work through some serious utility issues in that area, and we think we've come up with some great solutions. I'm here to speak on that. The rain garden, we have underground detention. I think we're definitely improving the runoff. It was quite the engineering challenge with your engineering staff when we couldn't figure out how the water gets out of there right now, because it would fill up with 3-4 feet of water and then go somewhere, and we weren't sure where it was going. So it was, if you had been to the site before, the garages were tucked under in the rear we're pretty sure it was getting into the sanitary sewer, but we still don't know, but we have a solution. So as staff mentioned, I think we've complied with everything within the zoning and the land use plan. I'm here to answer any questions you might have on our project.
or two. The sidewalk proposed will be further back from the street than where it is now, and it'll hook up to the sidewalk coming from the west?
Correct.
Yay, that's all good. And the detention garden that has the landscape plan that we've seen here, do you have any native or prairie plantings proposed for that site?
That's actually, will be specified in the site plan.
Okay.
So we're in the preliminary plat stages, so we'll do a soil analysis, and then we'll figure out which plants will actually survive it. If we can put in native grasses, that's always our intent. Anything with a deep root system is always our intent. The soil will drive my condition on what we design for that. So we want to make it sure that it's as perkable, right? Because the idea of a rain garden is we want to make sure we get as much water in, it filters and it slows it down.
Right.
Prairie grasses aren't always the best for a rain garden. Some of them aren't very water tolerant, but the deep root grasses are, which are found around like wetlands and stuff. Those are the plants that we typically, it'll be plugged, right? So you get a plug
Right.
of it, it'll go into the mulch, and then it'll
But the
start.
riprap won't be like prominent or things like that?
There's no intention of
No
riprap on this one. This is all supposed to be a softscape is what we've presented. Because again, we were challenged with, we have quite a bit of off-site runoff that gets onto this site and had
Right.
no place to go.
Okay.
So,
It's also there's a risk of it becoming a fly dumping site because there's currently 6 or 7 tires there. I think the quicker you remove those, the less you have a chance of more people doing more fly dumping.
I was not aware of the dumping condition, but that is on the contractor. That's not our,
Okay.
I'm
If you
not
could let them know, I was there yesterday, and
Okay.
there were 6 or 7 tires, and you know how those just kind of grow if people think that's a great place to put them, so,
and sofas and everything else. We're
yeah,
very familiar with that process.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience tonight who wants to speak in support of this item? Anyone opposed? Please come forward. You've got 5 minutes. Please state your name and address and sign in when you're finished.
Hello. My name is Maria LaFrance, and some people had trouble hearing back there. Can you hear me? Okay, good. If I'm too loud, let me know and I can back off. But I mostly want to express my gratitude for living in such a well-managed city. I'll start with that. And for not having to come here before today. So thank you for that. I own multiple properties in Des Moines, and usually when I see a notice of planned development, I vote yes. Some examples are the planned development in the old Godfathers on University near 42nd, and also the expansion of the Library Cafe a few years back, and so on. This is the first notice I've received on this property. I didn't receive a notice on the density change, and that feels a bit like a mistake to me. But today I do stand in opposition. From my kitchen window, I can see 4820 Ingersoll, the subject property. I see about 20 bikes per hour biking along, as well as many pedestrians. I really enjoy seeing the bikes. People are having fun, biking along, talking to each other, and it's a general sense of conviviality and well-being. My husband and I also bike on that same stretch of Ingersoll almost daily. West of 48th Street, Ingersoll only has 2 lanes. Only one side of the road has a sidewalk because the other side has a steep drop-off, and there is no bike lane. The area is lush with forest canopy, wildlife, and it's desirable because of that. My principal concerns are density, safety, and the ratio of concrete to green space. Feels like we have climate change, and I've looked at these plans and I'm not qualified to say whether there is adequate preparation, and I don't know if any one of us is. I just have PTSD from that time we had 10 inches of rain in 1 hour, and I'm not sure that this building can handle that. The cramped nature of the buildings creates an environment for poor morale and potential hostility. Density. This density level might be suitable if the area was walkable to restaurants and shops, such as the townhomes you see in the East Village or in Sherman Hill. But there are no shops within a half a mile or maybe even closer to a mile of this location. This proposal is for 16 three-bedroom units. That's 48 bedrooms. If that's filled with families at 2 to a room, that's potentially 96 people. If the units only have adult roommates with only 1 to a room, that's potentially 48 vehicles. There's very limited parking on Ingersoll because of the bus stops. The surrounding properties are less dense and have more green space. Safety. At certain times of the day, the traffic is backed up along Ingersoll in that spot. I feel the extra traffic of 32 to 48 vehicles makes this less safe for a 2-lane road. If families with children move in, my concern is for the safety, as there's no place for residents to gather, to play catch, relax, put up a hammock, or even grill or have a picnic, which is the kind of thing you do when you live in a complex like that, or at least you hope that you do. The pictures to me look like a concrete jungle. Where there isn't a healthy outlet for exercise, there's a recipe for mischief, and also pedestrian and car accidents. I also don't see where the trash will be located on this property. If it's at the back of that long driveway, the neighbors hear that long beeping when the truck backs up. Not necessarily opposed to that, I just wanted to throw that in. Maybe there is a suitable trash area. Health. We have seen unprecedented storms and rainwater in recent years due to climate change. This particular property from the pictures seems to be above the limit of 65% for maximum impervious area for this zoning, RX1. In fact, it looks more like, I haven't done the math, but it looks like 80 to 85% concrete and structure. Also took a little look at Chapter 135. And the zoning regulations require at least 1/10 of an acre of open space for use by each tenant, and I also don't see that here.
Ma'am, you're at about 5 minutes.
Am I? Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Please don't forget to sign in. Okay, you've got 5 minutes to speak. Please also sign in when you're done and state your name and address.
My name is Mike Tramontina. I live at 4819 Waterbury Road, directly across the street from this project. My front door faces the front doors of this project. At first blush, there's a lot to like about this project. It seems to fit all the city's goals and priorities. The neighborhood itself has a mix of single-family and multifamily houses, and there's multifamily right next door to this. Multifamily can fit in there. There's no objection to that. It's replacing poor-quality multifamily housing with very high-quality multifamily housing. It is increasing the density on an existing lot in the city. Those are all goals of the city, and none of those things are objectionable. And it's an attractive project. But the problem that I'm here to object to is that there is really too much of a good thing here. This went from 8 units to 16 with 2 car garages, and the 8 units that were there. Some units were on the first floor and some units were on the second floor. All 16 of these units are going to have a footprint on the ground. These 4 rows, all the way back to the back of that lot, will really have to be shoehorned to get into the lot, to get into that lot. That is not in keeping with the neighborhood, and I don't think that's really one of the city's goals, to squeeze as much as possible into every square foot. So my objection, and what I'd ask you to do, is send this back to the developer and to reduce this density. 12 units should fit on there just fine, but these 16 units are going to have to be literally shoehorned to get into this lot. That is not in keeping with Waterbury. That's not in keeping with the city's goals, and I'd ask you to rethink that. Thank you.
Again, please state your name and address and sign in when you're finished.
Hi, I'm Mark Stallman. I live at 4814 Ingersoll. I'm the property adjacent to the proposed property to the east. We moved to this property in the fall of 2022. Knowing that there were apartments on both sides of our property, it was a challenging decision to decide if we wanted to buy a single-family home between 2 apartment buildings. But the property to our west, 4820, was a smaller complex, single-story, with the remainder of the lots being open behind it. There were trees on the lot. It was a big open space. After moving in and hearing this proposal, knowing that there are going to be 4 sets of 4 townhomes almost butting up to our property line, I think there's a 7-foot amount of distance between our property line and where the buildings will be, and then 3.5 stories high, that we're going to have construction that will be overlooking our property significantly, which is a concern. The other concern, in addition to that lack of privacy, is what we refer to with the stormwater runoff. There's currently a pond on that property, and if you've been there, you've seen what I'm talking about. Since that rain we had last week, that pond has been there, and even when there was a building there, the water has nowhere to go. So that's something to be considered. I've seen that water sit there. In the winter with snow melt, it's the same issue. I'm also concerned with snow removal in the winter from this property. If we get a 6-inch snow, where's that snow going to go? Because there's not going to be room on the property to push that snow somewhere. And lastly, I'm concerned about traffic. With the potential of as many residents as could live on this property, it's a significant increase in the number of residents and potentially the number of cars that are on this property as well. There have been times where cars have been backed up past my driveway from Polk Boulevard in Ingersoll, especially when school is starting and ending. Those times of day, we're unable to get in and out of our drive because that traffic is backed up. So it's a concern if we add potentially 32 more cars on the street, the traffic could increase and that could be a continued issue as well. I know there's proposed changes in the sidewalk in front of the property, but up and down Ingersoll, that sidewalk is adjacent to the road. And while it's a wide sidewalk, traffic is right next to you on that sidewalk. Increasing the number of people to this degree on Ingersoll will increase that traffic, which concerns me. It's always a concern when I walk my dogs. If they get too close to the edge, cars are right there. And the more traffic we have, the more of a concern that becomes for me. So those are the main points I want you to consider. A lower density, fewer units on that property would be something that I would ask for. The property itself, it's going to be a beautiful space. It's going to be well used, but just with not that many units is what we'd ask for. So, do you have any questions for me as a adjacent property owner?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this item? Or anyone neutral? Okay, applicant, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal, if you'd like it.
Again, Wally Pelds, Pelds Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. I don't have anything to add to our presentation or to staff's presentation, so unless any questions arose while in the opposition, then I'm happy to answer them.
What type of weather event is that retention built for?
Oh, it's built for the 100-year storm.
100-year storm? And does that, I apologize for not knowing all my facts. So what the amount that she was talking about, a 10-minute time span, is that within the 100-year boundary?
I would need to know the timing of it. 10 inches in a certain period of time, maybe a 100-year storm, but that's just I would need to know the timing of it, right?
Yep, okay, yeah.
So if it came in,
I'm sorry, I forget the-
3-4 hours, then it's above 100-year. If it's beyond 6 hours, it's probably getting close to that 100-year. I would need to look at the hydrograph that generated it.
Okay, yeah, so it's basically, we think it should be fine, given what we've actually done for this area for 100-year area, so there shouldn't be a water issue is your conclusion?
And as per all the designs, we have an emergency overflow, which should not inundate any of the properties. I mean, as they mentioned, it is a pond to nowhere right now that all the neighborhood kind of drains to, and we don't know where it goes. So
Gotcha. So at least now we'll know.
we know we're fixing that problem, and we're controlling it.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So what is the contingency plan with the rain garden if you do get a 150-year rainfall? Is there, because I know a lot of those designs, they have the overflow and the honeycomb top. Will you guys have something similar to that, and will it be tied in, or will you get clearance to tie it into the storm drains?
It'll actually spill on that northwest corner over into Ingersoll Avenue, as is designed by most of it. That was the design that your city engineer agreed to.
Where's the spill point?
That'll be shown on that site plan. I don't have that shown on the preliminary plat. This is to subdivide the lots. I don't have that information with me, but it's relatively in the northwest corner. So you see where the sidewalk makes the curve?
Yep.
It should go over that, and then
Where the
Yep.
top left corner where the fiber optic
Yep.
vault is? Okay.
Yep, out and then out into the street.
Onto the street, okay.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity to, since it is so close to the street, to tie in straight to the storm drain?
There is no storm drain.
There's no storm drain there?
That was part of our problem.
Okay. Where's the next receiver for water off of that street?
It is down the road. The next one on Ingersoll is a great distance to the west, almost half a mile.
A mile? And the grade just is downhill, so it just
It's
runs.
if you've been on Ingersoll, that was a great place to ride bikes as a kid. I know the neighborhood well.
Is the current location of where the community saying the ponding is that right where this current rain garden will be?
The current location would be, if we can go back a few slides to the aerial, I can show you. So if you zoom in on that, so you can see where the building is. So there's 8 garage units underneath that it's kind of tucked under garage units. So right next to the building, the water would pool 3 to 4 feet deep because that was excavated and cut down. So we believed it was going into the floor drains into the garage, which then was getting into the sanitary sewer, which was overwhelming the system and causing other problems. So that is where we understood it to go.
Okay. And then my last question for the rain garden, what surface area were you calculating for the size of your rain garden? So like essentially, what are you counting for? The roofing, rainfall, the gutters, and then any of the concrete?
Yeah, on the site plan, which is in with staff, we show a rain garden portion, which should handle most of our stormwater quality water.
Okay.
We additionally have, along that long paved section that you saw along the western boundary, underneath that is all underground detention.
Okay.
So the developer has agreed to invest in all that underground detention to make it so that the 100-year storm, we're not releasing more than a 5-year rate.
Okay. I mean, I feel comfortable from the water standpoint. Yeah, if SUDAS and those standards were being followed, which it sounds like it has been, I think it should handle. The only concern that I have, and I think this goes back to city staff, is just there's not a storm system or a storm drain there. And typically when these practices, we would tie in, because he's accounting for what's on his property, but a lot of times, depending on the grade of the development, he can get more water than he can account for. So that's why I was asking if there's a tie-in. So I feel comfortable with the rain garden, but I think this is off subject. We need to start talking about storm systems and storm drains in our city as well. Thank you.
That'll be listed on the site plan. I don't have that offhand.
On the site plan, it's 64.8%, so it falls under the limit.
How about the trash enclosure, or will individual trash cans be used? Was that addressed?
Again, I believe that's on the site plan, and I believe that they're going to do individual trash cans.
Yeah, the proposal is for residential pickup.
So there would be
They'll have
30
cans.
32 garbage cans and recycling
No,
cans?
16. There's 16 units.
Well, if
Oh,
they're- if
yes,
they have
if you have garbage and
recycling.
recycling, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, each
Okay.
unit would have one of each.
Will this come back to us probably for the site, when the site plan?
There are no design alternatives, no
So-
type 2s.
So it won't?
Yeah, it
No.
won't.
I think I have a couple more questions, actually. So there is each unit gets 2 parking spaces, correct?
Correct.
There's no other parking on site?
No.
Okay. And then my last question was a resident raised the question of snow removal. What is your guys' plans for that?
If you can zoom that out just a little bit. So where you see that purple line, that is the drainage way that comes all the way around where we're collecting water from all the properties that come onto this one. So we did the offsite calculations, your city engineer has reviewed those. So we would be pushing into those drainage spaces. So straight up, all the way down. If you notice, we have the trees pushed back a little bit because that's usually an issue. If you put the landscaping right behind the curb, it gets pushed out with the snow removal. So those are pushed back along the front, as well as where rain gardens are great places to put snowstorm events, right? It also is a great place to store the snow to let it melt in the springtime when it comes back. Unlike, for example, the Target parking lots that I've been to, that they have those mountains of snow in the winter right in the middle of the parking lot. So that would, most of the time, it's going to be pushed those directions. Again, if there's a uncontrolled event or an event beyond the normal scope, I think everyone will struggle, just like, downtown in the city, but then they would start to have to haul it off, just like the city does. So that's more of a maintenance question. That's my understanding of the operation. That's how we designed it, so I can speak to the design of it.
And then can you describe what your swell line is essentially? Is that just like a concrete water transferring
That's
pit or?
As I recall, I believe we've gone back and forth with staff. I don't know the final resolution that it came to, but it's a very flat grade. So it either went to concrete. We also proposed a French drain, which is rock and pipe underneath it, and I don't remember which result we ended up with the developer.
Okay.
Either one works because it creates enough flow to get the water around. It's not standing there and pooling. But I do not recall which version the developer went with.
The only, so I like that idea. So an advanced rain garden is what I will call it today. An advanced rain garden is similar. It has those tiling systems under. I wonder if you could stick with the tiling, with the gravel, but on top build that basin with amended soils to increase your water capacity along that whole run line.
I think we looked at that seriously, but it was a grade issue, right? Okay. So then I'm trying to comply with SUDAS and getting that water to the rain garden as it comes around. So I'm fairly limited. That's a long run to run water. However, it also, with the longer run, it gives it opportunities for larger events to get into the grass as it comes around and slows it down.
Yeah, I would see if you can add some more amended soils to increase the water absorption, and then I would just native seed all that, so then it cuts down on your maintenance too, but then it increases the amount of water you can hold. Because it sounds like I'm sticking on this because I know this is a concern of the community, but if we can have that conversation, they can hear that you guys have done the good practices and stuff, so.
Wally, you've stated that this was a big challenge, and I'm wondering if you could move from, if you were able to have designed around 12 units, would that have helped you along this project? And is that possible?
That's a question for the developer, unfortunately. I'm just the design engineer. 12 is kind of an odd number at that point, because then I'm unbalanced, right? I'll have two driveways with a middle split. Does that make sense? I think they were trying to go for efficiency to make something that's still fairly affordable. It's not going to be inexpensive in any sense. These are, I believe they're marketing them at a fairly high dollar value. And then to recover there is substantial expense in that stormwater, that underground stormwater detention and the rain garden. And rain gardens are very maintenance and labor intensive. We try to plant native species as much. There is that stormwater management manual that we try to follow when we do all these, and I believe we've followed all the principles in this one. If we can get more soils in it, I will try. I can't promise it because it might take me out of my volumes of what I need to store. So it's kind of that balance, and we've worked hand in hand with your staff on this, and they seem to agree that this is a good use, good intent. It recycles something that was an eyesore. And that's how I would answer that question.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Otherwise, I'll close the public hearing and ask for comments.
I guess, staff, what was your guys' recommendation on this one? Again, my apologies.
Staff was in support of the proposal.
And you had no adjustments or anything? Okay.
No, they met all of the city code requirements, the zoning requirements, the land use density.
And then any questions on, is there any concerns on density on your end?
No.
Okay.
No questions on density. That land use plan was amended to allow the slight bump over the medium density, so I know that they worked extensively with the engineering department to work through all the stormwater management. They had a lot of back and forth conversation and worked very closely with engineering to meet all of those requirements.
Thank you.
I feel very comfortable with the staff recommendation on this one, so I will move that.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, let's
I'll chime in quick. Yeah, I feel comfortable as well. Just from my background in working in rain gardens and in the environmental space, I think how he's managing the water is probably one of the best plans I've seen since being on this board. He's doing everything he possibly can. It seems like he can guarantee that the water will be staying on his property. It seems like he would have taken extra steps if there was a storm system there as well. This is good practice. This is what we want to see on Ingersoll density-wise, with the road diet, with bikeability. There is a limited amount of parking, so that's going to force human behavior and habit. So I'm for it for right now. So.
Thank you. We have a motion to move staff. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving to item number 6, a request from Thomas Burkhead for review and approval of a public hearing site plan for property located at 1312 Rittenhouse and for a type 2 design alternative to allow construction of a 480 square foot detached garage within the front yard where an accessory structure is not allowed. And Sriyoshi will present for the city.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sriyoshi Chakraborty, planning staff. I'm presenting item number 6, which is a request for a property at 1312 Rittenhouse Street. And the request is for a type 2 design alternative to allow the construction of a 480 square foot detached garage in the front yard of an existing single-family dwelling in an N3B neighborhood district, where an accessory structure such as a garage is not allowed in the front yard area. So the subject property is located on Rittenhouse Street. This is south of Army Post Road, so kind of south east of the airport area. It is west of Southwest 9th Street. And the area is generally single-family residential. The zoning is N3B neighborhood district. The subject property here is about 6,800 square foot. And if you can see here in the aerial, the houses, the existing dwelling unit structure is set back quite a bit on the property. So here's some pictures. The subject property is right here. I believe this is looking west. You can see that there's a slight elevation change. So there's a slight rise here. This is again looking to the east. This is the subject property. Here's the existing unimproved driveway. And again, you can kind of see a little bit of the elevation change that's happening here. This is a different view. As you can see, this is the dwelling unit, the existing dwelling unit that's set back quite a ways. And here's a better view. So this is the driveway. The proposal is to place the garage to the front of the existing structure, so it'll be kind of right here, and I'll go here to the plan, and you can see that slightly better. So here is the existing house, the proposed garage, which is about 480 square foot. It's about 11 feet away from the existing structure. It's right here, and here's the approach from off of the street to the garage. This is a profile view of the garage, and as you can see, it's about 15 feet in height. This would be facing the neighbor, the wall, the 15-foot wall would be facing the neighbor to the west, and then there's a metal roof that slopes down, and the other side is about roughly about 9 feet. So the subject property is in a low-density residential area. As you saw from the pictures and the aerial, the existing structure is set back quite a ways on the parcel, and so therefore the applicant doesn't have the option to either place the detached garage in the side yard or the rear yard, which is what is required by code, and therefore the proposal is to place it on the front yard, which staff believes is in support of and is the viable option here. Additionally, staff has also looked at the existing character of the neighborhood and the setbacks. So currently, the way the proposed garage is placed, it matches the setback of the adjacent houses. So it's not sticking forward or back. It is roughly matching the setback of the neighboring two houses. So from that standpoint, staff feels that it meets the intent of the code, and it meets the intent of matching the character of the adjacent area, as well as the constraint of the existing structure being set so far back, therefore not having the option to place the detached garage in the side or the rear yard. So with that, staff is supportive of this type 2 design alternative request, with the subject to a couple conditions. And the first condition is that the garage be constructed with a gable style roof, and that is the intent of that condition is to enable the character of the garage, the materiality and so on, to match the existing character of the neighborhood. And therefore staff is recommending that the garage be constructed with a gable style roof, which is what the style of most of the roofs in that area is. And then the second condition is that a new concrete driveway approach as well as driveway be installed with the installation of the new garage. So those are the two. Staff is supportive of the request with these two conditions.
Sure. To your knowledge, are the applicants in agreement with that?
So my understanding, and the applicant can speak to this, my understanding is that the applicant is in agreement with the second condition, but is not in agreement with the first condition, and they're here to talk more about why that's the case. We did not receive any comments either in support or in opposition to this particular request. Here's the consent map. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
What's the reasoning behind the gable roof?
The reasoning for the gable roof is to match the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Most of the houses and the garages in that area have the gable style roof, and so staff is recommending that to match the character of the neighborhood.
Do you want to put up the drawing of the shed style roof that they are wanting?
Yep. So yeah, that's, you can see here, that's what they have proposed.
Chris, did you have a question?
The 35-foot setback from the street, is that consistent with the other buildings along there, or is it set back further? I mean, I guess I can't tell from the map how far back 35 feet is.
Yeah, so staff did look into that, and you can see here in the aerial. So what the applicant has proposed would match pretty closely with the two houses that are immediately adjacent to it. So it would be about roughly right here, the setback, the 30-foot setback.
So if you're asking for a gable, which end does the gable end? Would the gable end be facing the road, or gable
Facing
end be
the street.
facing with the other houses?
Yeah, it's 16 feet wide by 30 feet deep, so I think the logical way, and they could probably do either, but the logical way would be to have the gable face north and south.
Do you know if the picket fence will be torn down that's existing?
I do not know. I would probably defer that to the applicant. You're talking about this fence right here.
Well, there's that fence, and then where all the zinnias are, which are beautiful, there's picket fence in there, in those two.
Oh, I see right here. Okay. Yeah, I do not know. I'll defer that to the applicant.
Okay. And so will the garage, see there's the curb stop there, you can see it? Is that where the garage will go, right up against the back picket fence? See the curb stop that's there if you zoom in? See it? Oops.
She's referring to the concrete chunk that's just in front of the fence itself.
Okay, I'll ask, oops. Okay, I'll ask. And then, do you know the impervious percentage once this project is done?
I do not know the number, but I believe that they would be meeting that, and therefore they will not need a
Okay. Okay, thanks.
relief for that.
Any other questions for staff?
The roof, it's a metal roof, is what is proposed right now.
Okay, and you feel like that matches with the neighborhood and that's acceptable? What about the siding on the walls?
I think the concern was mostly the roof of the garage, because it's a metal
style.
roof. Yeah,
Yep.
so that was the concern.
Thank you. Looks like the applicant is present. You have 10 minutes to present. Please state your name and address and sign in on the sheet on the table there when you're done.
Hello, my name's Thomas Burkhead. I live at 1312 Rittenhouse Street, which is the property we're talking about here. The reason for this request is the actual permit to site the detached garage in front of the house. So I don't really think there's any, that's what the permit's for, is the actual location and not really for the design aspects. But I will speak to them. I bought this house like about 20 years ago. It was paid $10,000 for it. It was assessed at $5,000. I've pretty much invested like over $100,000 into it, and now it's assessed at like $80,000 at its most recent assessment. This garage I want to put in will probably represent like another like $60,000 or $75,000 invested in this property, and it's part of a larger goal to this entire property will be like native landscaping and rain gardens, some of the other things that, some of the other projects that you guys were talking about earlier. The reason for the shed-style roof and the slant is because this project will have an 11 kilowatt solar roof on it. I've already worked with the solar company, One Solar out of Ankeny, which is partnering with Des Moines and Polk County for the Grow Solar Iowa initiative. So this is part of that project. So that's why we need the slanted roof. It's consistent with that neighborhood. This is a very old neighborhood. All the houses were built in the 40s, primarily for people returning from World War II, with this proximity to Fort Des Moines. So it is like a working class neighborhood. So over the years, the uses have changed in this neighborhood for what housing was needed, you know, and so it's a kind of an eclectic neighborhood in that way. And so the kind of the uniqueness of this design still fits with that neighborhood, but is a little bit different because, you know, the uses are different, adding solar and adding more native landscaping to the property, you know, so that's going to change the look of the neighborhood a little bit, but probably for the better, especially considering the financial investment. I've talked to all my neighbors. I've known them, you know, pretty much my whole life. I'm only 36 and I've owned this house for 20 years. They're all really supportive of it, and none of them were here today because they didn't think they needed to be. They've all said that they would write letters of support if that was necessary. But again, this permit is just to site it in front of the house. And as you can see, there's really no other location. There's the backyard's really small, so and there would be no street access. So without this permit and siting it in front of the house, we just won't have any investment in this property at all. So I can answer any questions you might have.
I had one question. Was there a certain angle that you need? Is it a pitch? Is that what they call in roofing? Is a certain pitch or angle?
Yeah, it is pitch, and I think the contractor, he's calling it like a 16.4. He said it's kind of like a standard pitch, and he worked with the solar designer on that too, because we're trying to get like a certain pitch so we can get like just like for building, and then when the solar panels, we're trying to get like a certain angle with that so we can collect the most sunlight as well.
Okay.
But the solar panel will be facing east, not south, right?
Right, so it's going to get, so right, that is true, but we're trying to get the most daylight, and we're also trying to, there's a lot of trees in that neighborhood, so we're trying to work within those trees too. And it's kind of hard to tell, but if you can go back to like maybe that front-facing photo, my neighbor's property to the west is really like, probably like waist high, like 5 or 6 feet, at some places maybe, 5 or 6 feet above grade from my house, because that's like cut out. And so there's a retaining wall you can't really see because of the flowers, but there's a 4-foot retaining wall all along that property. So the height of the garage really isn't going to be, it's going to be below the height of her camper there. So it won't really affect her property as much as maybe you would see if you're looking at it from a flat piece of paper.
And then what about the fencing? That will remain?
Yeah, that white fence, like all that's coming out. Like this is I'm going to spend like close to $75,000 like completely re-landscaping this property. So it'll be pretty cool. So like all that'll be completely out. It'll be like kind of like a crown jewel of this neighborhood is the plan.
And then the garage will go all the way to where the curb stop is now?
So the garage, this is what we're talking about, the setback. So the code, the city code is 25 feet, so it would be a driveway of 25 feet, and then the garage would start there, and that would go 30 feet, and so then between the garage and the house would be like 15 feet. And if you're looking at like the other properties, it fits like right, I mean, it's like the best design possible for that area. So, I mean, there's no better use for this piece of property in this neighborhood.
Okay. And the entrance will be just one single car, or will it be?
One single car, and so like the garage door will be like 9 feet wide.
Okay, so there won't be a parking pad?
No parking pad, there'll be, it's the existing, if you can go back to that, the existing gravel driveway is the existing footprint. It'll actually be kind of smaller than that, and so there'll be some landscaping on both sides of that. It'll actually kind of improve it. And the other condition that the city wanted was a concrete driveway. I'm planning on doing like an impervious driveway, so it'll be like limestone slabs with gravel underneath it, and we'll try to retain some of that water for one of the water gardens. So I'm definitely going to be improving it from the existing driveway now, but I don't think concrete is the route I want to go. That's not really what this permit is about. It's about putting it in front of the house.
So are you seeking exception on both of the conditions then?
I mean, if push comes to shove and the city wants that to be concrete and that's a condition of this being built, I will put concrete there, but I guess I'm not aware of this process if there are conditions to a permit like this. If it has to be concrete to do that, I can go with concrete, but if it has to be a gable roof, I cannot build that existing structure and I cannot do solar, and I'm probably not going to spend $75,000 doing that, so I'll probably just not do this project at all and just leave it as is. So.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Like he said, the purpose of the appeal tonight is for the setback and for the placement of the garage, but in order for staff to be supportive, we recommended these two conditions. And one, I guess we're probably not going to die in that ditch if he's really needing that roof to do the solar panel. That's a good thing ultimately. So I think we still feel the gable would be more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So we're not going to change our recommendation. But number two, it's written so staff recommends a concrete driveway. We could revise that to say the new driveway needs to be impervious, or it needs, it needs to be so it achieves the goal of having a solid surface, but could still let water through.
And so if I had to do a gable.
Sure. Yeah, it could be the open brick. It could be the pavers with space between them. It's just something that's not gravel, I guess, because gravel has the ability to like run into the street. and whatnot, so.
Yeah. I mean, my occupation is landscape design. Like, I have a really cool idea for this property, so, I mean, I'm not just kind of half doing this. Like, this is going to be kind of a cool project if I can go forward with it, so, and the neighborhood is all in support, and I probably could have got them all here, but we just didn't really know this process at all, and we didn't really know, when I was talking to Kyle at the city, before these few emails that had these conditions, it just sounded like it was just about whether or not it was in front of the house, and that it was probably green lighted because there's no other place to put it. So like, based on those conditions, that would just be green lighted because you can't put it behind the house, so.
But from all those things, I mean, basically though, it sounds like there may be support for a shed-style roof because it is solar. It sounds like there's support for pervious.
I can hear some of the things, so I was just making sure my point was clear, and, I mean, if there's.
And ask the commissioners for our thoughts.
Comment. I feel like he's doing everything right. He bought a house that was empty, and he's drawing the value up.
Can we use like some impervious language? Can we use like some impervious language?
We can come up with the correct wording, but it would be something, any garage must be accessed by a driveway that is, either paved or an impervious surface.
Yeah.
I got a question for him. Are you familiar with SUDA standards for like pervial pavers and?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we can.
I don't want to keep it gravel.
Okay, so if we just fall along those lines of SUDAS, then I think that allows him to do pretty much what he needs.
And really, the point is to have it done at the same time, right? I mean, the goal is to clean it up, and you mentioned that it was, and that, I think it's important that we keep in there that it's installed with the garage, so that it's, doesn't sit gravel a long time afterwards.
Is there a chance, so if I'm understanding correctly, we're saying we're wanting to move that we accept a shed-style roof, conditional on it having the solar with it, and we accept that we're going to waive the pavement as long to be allow for permeable pavers or in some permeable
Pervious,
surface?
yeah.
Pervious surface, sorry. So,
Permeable.
but we don't need to say how it has to be done, we just need to say it's going to be permeable, is that right?
Say it can be permeable.
Can be, yep, sorry, okay.
And I don't know if I heard the solar panels as a condition in the motion, so if somebody wanted to make.
So we're saying we'd allow the shed-style roof even if the solar panels are cut?
That was the current motion, but if you wanted to make a friendly amendment to make it a condition.
So, okay, so we're okay as a group saying, hey, we're cool with the shed style, but we're going to require the solar because that's why we allowed the shed style to make sure that we're providing precedent for in the future. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, works for me. Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to restate that or? Okay. I can try to summarize, or Justin, do you want to? Go ahead.
So it sounds like the friendly amendment is that I move to waive the gable roof so long as the solar is installed, and waive the requirement for concrete so long as a permeable paver construction build, whatever, that follows SUDA standards is installed. There you go.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand.
All right, motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. And we will move to item 7, which is a request from Midwest Radio, Inc. for review and approval of a public hearing site plan at 3839 Merle Hay for property located in the vicinity of same, and for the consideration of a denied Type 1 design alternative to allow retention of the middle of 3 existing access drives along Merle Hay where only 2 are permitted. And Jillian will present for the city.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Jillian Summer with planning staff. The property at 3839 Merle Hay Road is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Merle Hay and Douglas, just to the east of Merle Hay Mall. The project includes tenant improvements and interior renovation. The value of the project is exceeding the threshold of cumulative permit values, which requires the site plan in conformance with current landscaping and site plan standards. The site plan includes landscaping improvements along the street frontages, as well as interior parking lot landscaping, improvements to the trash enclosure, and bike racks as well. This is their landscaping plan that's proposed. The site currently has 3 driveway accesses, one at the north end. This is a controlled signalized intersection, one in the middle and one at the south. The middle and the southern driveway accesses are right-in, right-out configurations. There is a median that separates Merle Hay Road, so they are right-in, right-out. The building is considered a commercial center building, and it allows for one driveway per 300 lineal feet of frontage. This property has 400 lineal feet of frontage, so they're allowed 2 driveway accesses. The applicant is requesting to maintain 3, and staff is recommending that we follow the requirements for 2 driveway accesses. We are recommending that the middle driveway be the one that's removed, because the northern driveway is a shared access and the southern one is a shared access as well. Traffic staff, as well as planning and engineering staff, have reviewed this. There are several city initiatives that have recently been adapted and reviewed that support our recommendation. The first is the Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. As the name implies, the goal of Vision Zero is to eliminate traffic fatalities. The Vision Zero plan identifies Merle Hay Road as a high injury network, meaning it is one of the highest crash rates in the city. The Vision Zero plan also identifies corridor access management as one of the tools to manage transportation safety by controlling the number and type of conflict points between vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes. The Iowa statewide Urban Design and Specifications, SUDAS, as well as the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, repeat this message, saying the number of driveways per mile significantly affects the safety of a corridor. Crash rates increase very quickly as the number of access points increases on arterial roadways, which Merle Hay Road is an arterial roadway. Another initiative that the city recently completed that supports staff recommendation is the Merle Hay Road Corridor Study. This one is specific to Merle Hay Road, whereas Vision Zero is citywide. The Merle Hay Road Corridor Study focused on Merle Hay between Hickman and Aurora, which this property is located along. The Merle Hay Road Corridor Study has recommendations related to access points as well. The specific recommendations for this property, or the portion of Merle Hay adjacent to this property, indicate that many of the accesses can and should be consolidated as development occurs. The Merle Hay Corridor Study also identified the need for improved pedestrian access and mobility. There is currently no sidewalk along this portion of Merle Hay. There is sidewalk along the properties to both the north and the south, and there is a DART stop located at the north end of the property as well. The city has a neighborhood sidewalk infill program that designates some city dollars towards infilling sidewalk. As part of the city's neighborhood sidewalk infill program, the city is proposing to actually construct and pay for the sidewalk to be installed along the east side of Merle Hay Road adjacent to this property to fill this gap. In coordination, the city would propose to close the middle driveway as part of the scope of the city project. The new sidewalk further amplifies the need to close the driveway to minimize potential conflicts with pedestrians. The site has 2 other access points, as well as access to 57th at the east, as well as cross access through the property to the south, getting traffic to Douglas. Staff believes that because the middle driveway duplicates the turning movement of the southern driveway, that its removal would not deter a driver from accessing the site, and it would improve safety for vehicles and pedestrians. We also believe that removal of the driveway would allow for additional parking spaces, a need that has been identified by the property owner. Staff believes that to further the goals of Vision Zero as well as the Merle Hay Corridor study, that we would recommend denial of the design request to allow 3 driveways. We do recommend approval of the site plan subject to compliance with administrative review comments and subject to removal of the middle driveway. We did receive feedback from the Merle Hay Neighborhood Association. Their board discussed the item, and a majority of the board concurred with the staff recommendation. If you'd like to see a few pictures of the site.
Can you point out which, what entry point are you asking to be removed?
So this, what you're seeing here is the southernmost driveway. The driveway to be removed is this one. And then as you move, this is the driveway that would be removed. This is moving north. This is the controlled signalized intersection at the very north end of the property. This is the dart stop. The city's project would include some improvements around the dart stop, obviously.
Is the applicant asking for an additional entry point?
No, it would be to maintain the 3 driveways.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, I misheard you. Is this the only condition the city's asking for, is just the removal of this section?
That's correct.
Okay. What does the applicant think of it?
It's actually eligible for a type 1 design alternative, and they requested that. It's been denied. The applicant would like to maintain 3 driveways.
Okay.
Why is this considered 3 driveways versus 1 plus 2 halves? I mean, like, they have 1 driveway and now they have 2 halves. That doesn't seem like 3 to me. That seems like 2.
The driveways are viewed as access points into the property, and so they do have 3 access points into their property.
They have 1 plus 2 halves of the access point, right?
I see your point.
Okay, just checking. So however we do the math, it doesn't exactly seem like they have 3. But
Wait, back up. So does the property owner own the whole lot?
Yes.
Okay.
they don't own the 2 halves of the driveways on the top and the bottom. They only own half of those. You can't put a car through half a driveway, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
There are easements.
Okay. Can you show me that layout?
Yeah.
So that's the one for removal. And then he splits the driveway on the far left?
The north and the south are
Okay.
the
And then-
halves as,
Okay. And then the one on the right is the light?
yes.
Okay.
One more question. And why is it that the city is proposing to pay for this sidewalk, but not many of the others that we see? I mean, this seems like we're asking for modification. It seems like we would normally require them to put in the sidewalk. Why is the city paying for this one?
The city identified this sidewalk as the need prior to the point at which a site plan was required. And so they had already started plans, and rather than shelving those plans and just pushing the requirement to the applicant, they've just continued forward with the original plans.
So we'll be voting on whether to deny his request or approve it. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Is the applicant present? You've got 10 minutes to present. Please provide your name and address and sign in on the sheet when you're done.
Doug, excuse me, Doug Saltzgaver, Engineering Resource Group, 2413 Grand Avenue, Des Moines. Also with us here is the property owner, Rich Eichner, and Andy Burton. So if I can't answer a question, I'm certainly thinking they will be able to. Jillian did a nice job of explaining how we got to this point, and you'll have to forgive me. I've got some drawings, hopefully you can project those up. I'm getting credit for this time, right? Something's happening. Thank you. So what this document represents is a drawing.
Please speak into the mic for the recording. Thanks.
Sorry. What this drawing represents is what Mr. Eichner received in January or February. The drawing is dated January. The building is right here, and that's the access drive of our subject today. And that drawing shows that with the sidewalk project, that driveway was going to be removed and replaced. Then in May, Mr. Eichner received some correspondence from the city regarding the need to, for the city to acquire a temporary construction easement. And with that was this drawing. And I've highlighted the buildings. And it again shows the subject driveway to be remaining. So as we've been going on with the site plan process, originally when it was first communicated about this sidewalk project, the driveway was going to remain. Then during the site plan process, it said, well, we're probably going to ask you to remove that. Then he gets the request to sign an easement document, and those documents show his driveway to be remaining. So it's been a little confusing and frustrating as we've been going through this process. And Mr. Eichner has owned this property for about 20 years, and this is a photograph from 2006, before any redevelopment was done here. So Mr. Eichner controls that, and I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So Mr. Eichner controls all the property there, bound by number 1, 12, 18, and 25. And what those numbers represent is when he acquired the property, that's how many private accesses there were to this block, we'll call it. And now here is a 2023 photograph showing the entrances that are left. We're down now to 6. Actually, number 1 is a driveway for a single-family house, which will eventually go away as the parking lot is most likely expanded in that direction. So we'd be down to 5 total access points into this property. And actually, entrance number 2 is not owned by Mr. Eichner. A car wash has purchased that vacant piece of property, and what they purchased included that driveway. So there's been a 75% reduction in the number of driveways onto this site since 2006, all at the expense of the developer. And just on Morrill Hay, that's gone from 8 access points down to 3. So from Douglas Avenue over to the signalized intersection where Bankers Trust is just on the other side, there's about 700 feet and a total of 3 private entrances there. So you've got 3 entrances for each 700 feet of frontage. If we look to the north for 1,400 feet, which is twice 700 feet, there are 9 entrances, so an average of about 4.5 per 700 feet to equate it back to the frontage of our property. And then going south of Douglas Avenue, in the same 1,400 feet, there's 12 entrances. And some of those properties have 2 entrances each, even though they're fairly narrow and much smaller compared to the property on the north side of Douglas. So that's 4 times as many entrances, or 6 in that same, equivalent of 6 entrances in that 700 feet. We understand the need for safety. We have no issues with that. But Mr. Eichner and Andy have offices on the 2nd floor of this building that look out at Morrill Hay Road. And they said for the last 16 years, they have witnessed dozens and dozens of accidents. And every single accident that they've seen has occurred at the signalized intersection, not out here at the driveway that staff is wanting us to close off. So the issue is usually somebody thinks the car ahead of them is going to run through the yellow signal, and they don't, and that car stops and they get rear-ended. We were just having a phone conversation yesterday, and within about 30 minutes after that, at the signalized intersection, another accident. Developers put over $15 million into this property since he's owned it. There's been significant safety improvements he's put in by reducing the number of entrances, not only on University, but also on Douglas and to the east. 2 of the 3 entrances onto the site are right in, right out only, because there's a raised paved median in front of them. So that adds another level of safety, as you don't have opposing left turns that are conflicting with oncoming traffic. So you're either going right in or right out. So you have much fewer decisions to look at for traffic conflicts. And the 3rd entrance that's private, even though it is signalized, and that signalized intersection was put in and paid for by Mr. Eichner, Bankers Trust, and Morrill Hay Mall. So with that, we'd like to keep that existing entrance open. And I might also add, many of the people that come in here sometimes get confused if they come in through the signalized intersection. If it's a retail space that they're looking for on the 1st floor, that's usually signed pretty well. But I'm told when they come in the signalized intersection and find a place to park, the building's just long enough, they may not actually understand where to go in, so they go in one of the end doors, and then they're walking around lost trying to find where they're going, where they need to go. So we think that that middle entrance there is extremely important to the continued viability of the building and their tenants, and we ask that we be able to keep that. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Chris, go ahead.
Again, on this, I guess as I look at this, if I'm thinking about this, I guess I don't see 3 driveways, just as a quick recap of that piece. However, I did have some questions as well, though, because I also agree with that building jutting out. This is actually literally the first time, I've been there a bunch of times, this is the first time I realized it's all one building. It sticks out so much, it feels like it's separate, which I guess I didn't even think it was serviced there. So my question, though, is south of Douglas, the density of driveways down there is significantly higher than up here. Do we have any data, or have we been presented with any data that indicates that there is any statistically different safety level between what's just like 3 blocks south of Douglas versus this section here? Like, are we saying that all of Douglas is just dangerous and that we really need to take this other driveway apart, or are we actually seeing any statistically different data? I mean, I think there's like probably 10 driveways south of Douglas.
Vision Zero plan is very clear. Douglas is a high injury network that includes lots of crashes and deaths, and every opportunity that we have as a city to make it safer needs to be taken, whether it's by a private developer or the city funds. It's not safe. So curb cuts and speed are high drivers of unsafe conditions.
So we're saying that, so south of Douglas, we're saying that, is there a difference between south of Douglas and I'm sorry, of Merle Hay?
It's not broken down. Merle Hay, it's very clear on the Vision Zero website where the high crash areas are, and Merle Hay is way up there, and that's why, one of the reasons why the city is investing in sidewalks and things like that. It's not safe. I know you may feel safe in your car there, but those 3 curb cuts that are so close together are not safe for a bicyclist or a pedestrian that currently has to walk on the inside there because there's no sidewalk. I've ridden through there many, many times on my bike. It's not safe. And closing that curb cut is one of many things that the city can do to make our city safer, which it is not now.
A little hurt you don't think I bike, but that's okay.
Huh?
I have a bicycle. I ride it.
Do you ride your bike through there?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm sorry on that, but it's a very unsafe area, whether or not it's north or south of that, it's all unsafe. And having an opportunity to close a curb cut whenever we can is a major opportunity to make a difference.
Because my question to the applicant, though, we're saying that we don't have any data with respect to the safety rate or crash rate of north of Douglas versus south of Douglas along the stretch of road. Or we haven't looked at it, been presented with it?
I do not. I would think south of Douglas would be more dangerous because majority of that is not controlled with a median. So you have both, you have left turns and right turns going into driveways compared to here where the entire frontage is controlled. So you have no left turns coming into this property. It's only right in, right out. And that significantly reduces traffic accidents.
You said something about a car wash on the southwest corner. Is that, or did I mishear that?
It's not constructed, but a car wash did purchase that property.
On the corner of Douglas and Merle Hay, or where?
Right.
Down there. Okay.
Yes, where it's just grass now.
Any additional questions for the applicant tonight?
Yes, I have one. Will the parking lots in the storefront side, the retail side, the parking spots, will curb stops be added there? Because currently it's flush.
We're adding curb.
You're adding curb?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. What about the currently unused drive-through on the north side of your building? Will that be removed?
That's going to be removed and it will become parking stalls.
It'll become, I'm sorry, one more time.
It will become parking stalls.
Salts. Stalls, I'm
sorry.
sorry, I missed, okay, thank you.
Yes.
And the city is paying to underground the utilities when they do the sidewalk?
Not along Merle Hay, but we're looking to hopefully work out things with Mid-Am and CenturyLink. There's some overhead utilities going through the back parking lot that we'd like to get rid of.
Okay.
Depending on how the circuits work to different buildings.
So those will be undergrounded?
We're trying to. If it's feasible, that's what the intent is.
Okay, thank you.
Justin, do you have a question?
Yeah, is there going to be any economic impact if this access point is closed?
That's probably difficult to really quantify. I know Mr. Eichner said the tenants certainly want to see it. And we did have a little tussle with staff retaining the parking stalls out in front of the portion of the building that juts out, but we came to a compromise on that, and that would have been very significant because those 3 tenants that are in that end of the building, they want people to be able to come out and park right in front of their space. So we got that worked out.
I just ask because I frequent that Jimmy John's quite often. Just my behavior habit, I don't like entering in that centerpiece. I usually come in from the Dunkin' Donut or the traffic control, and I definitely always exit out of that traffic control. As a bicyclist, when I'm riding, there's just some things that just come to me naturally. I'm always looking at exit points and end points of other cars, and I'm always having to be alert because people aren't watching me. And just safety-wise, I can really get my bike moving. I can get up to about 25 miles an hour easily. But even at like a decent pace of 10 to 15 miles an hour, there has to be some very distinct decisions being made between those 2 access points. And definitely if they're turning right in and you're coming. For me, it just feels very risky. And it just makes optimal sense to get rid of it and put the slots in that you already need. Yeah, I'm just appealing to you as a resident who bikes. For me, it's scary. It really is. I've been almost taken off my bike multiple times by people driving around Des Moines. And that's why I try to stay on the bike trails. It's scary. So if the city wants to make it function at how it's supposed to with pedestrian, I would suggest getting rid of it. And I'm just appealing to you as a father who has 2 kids who wants to still be here every day. And yeah, it is scary. So.
Thanks, Justin. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Staff, if the curb cut does take away and there's some type of redevelopment, how does he get a new curb cut if he needs one? Because if we're willing to take it away, does he have access to get it if there's a boom, an increase into business demand, a new redevelopment? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if there were something to change, any redevelopment or new business or something different, the site plan could always be amended with a new request or new appeal if there's new information.
Yeah. It would likely have to come back to this commission, though, to get waiver of that requirement to only allow 1 drive access point per 300 feet.
And the property that was bought on the corner where the car wash is it probable that that access point will be taken out when that is redeveloped, or will it stay in place?
Are you talking about the access point on Douglas Avenue?
Yeah, where that empty lot was. Yes, sir.
You can put up the aerial, but it looks like there was a shared access point off Douglas and maybe 1 point off of 57th Street.
Yeah. So there's 3 accesses on Merle Hay, and there is one down here. It's on the property to the south,
On, yeah,
I think is
57.
what was being described. It does have easements in place for shared access coming
Okay.
off of that.
So that will stay even if that, once that lot does get redeveloped? Okay.
Presumably.
Is there anyone in the audience tonight who'd like to speak in support of this item? Please state your name, address, and sign in on the paper when you're done, please.
Good evening, Rich Eichner, 300 Walnut, Des Moines. I'm the property owner through an entity. There were a couple points I wanted to clarify from Doug's comments. In answer to the safety question, the city paid Bolton and Menck to make this 350-page report, which clearly states that the safety issue is greater below Douglas than it is north of Douglas. The incidents north of Douglas are much reduced to south of Douglas, and the reason is the number of entrances south of Douglas. I think it's, as Doug's graphic shows, south of Douglas, get this right, there are 12 entrances in 1,400 feet. We have 3 entrances in 700 feet by way of comparison. The other point I would make about that is that we have taken out 19 curb cuts during my ownership of this property. 19 curb cuts out of 25. And the signalized intersection, that's a case where Bankers Trust had a driveway and we had a driveway, and the two of us cooperated to reduce that to one common driveway. And then with our payment and Marley Mall's payment, we bought the traffic light, which was supposed to be TIFed, but it was never TIFed because somebody in the city never pushed it on through. So we spent $250,000 to improve that, make a signalized intersection, combine 2 driveways into one. If you look at the earlier photo, if I can find it. If you notice here, there was a landscaping piece that came out, and so Bankers Trust was to the left of that, above the number 25, and we were to the right of the 25. And so the 2 property owners collectively took it out, made a single entrance, shared entrance, and paid for half of the traffic light, and Merle Mall paid for the other half of the traffic light. In regards to the second floor, the other thing I'll say, the Bolton and Menck study showed the center driveway staying open, and this was delivered in March 31st, 2023. We received a letter in February of 2023 from the neighborhood sidewalk program showing the driveway being repaved by the city in 2024 and the sidewalk being added at that time. So we had 2 things from the city this year saying that driveway stays open. And then when the site plan came up, suddenly staff wanted to start closing it, changing the recommendations of both Bolton and Menck and the neighborhood sidewalk program. So we as a citizen are sitting there with the understanding that these things are staying open based on official communications from the city and official studies, and then staff said, no, let's go ahead and change it. You had a picture, if you could put it back up, of the front entrance to the building, whoever had that. Center, yeah, is that one more maybe? Okay, so if you look at this driveway, it takes you right into the center of the building. This building has 2 floors. Retail's on the first floor, offices on the second floor. We constantly have people who don't know how to get to the second floor of our building. We've added planters out front, which you see, to stick out into the parking lot. We've added a light fixture, we've added lighting, we put a sign over the doorway saying, this is where you come into the building. There are entrances on the north and the south of the building, but they're stairway only. So if somebody pulls in somewhere and they start looking, we have people going into Jimmy John's. We talked about going to Jimmy John's. People going to Jimmy John's trying to get to the second floor. The only way you can get to the second floor with ADA accessible elevator is through that entrance. And the only way you can see that is if you turn in the front door right into the entrance. If you're going down past the building, or you have to turn before you see the entrance, you're almost SOL trying to get up to the second floor. So
Thank
it
you,
is
sir. Your time has elapsed. Please go ahead and wrap up. Your 5 minutes has elapsed.
Okay, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in support of this item tonight? Anyone opposed? Or neutral? And the applicant, do you have any desire for rebuttal? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask the commissioners for our thoughts.
I guess I understand I'm not a mathematician, but I guess as I look at this thing and I'm thinking about the precedent of it, right? Forgetting whatever's been sent by the city, fine, there's plans always change. I understand this changes things. I don't think that the previously thing being sent is an indication that that's a promise. This is a quick default position. At the same time, I guess, again, I'm seeing one entrance to really one building, and if we're really looking at functionally how this thing works, I'm seeing one entrance to really sort of two buildings with a covered breezeway is sort of how you fully attach this thing. I agree as well. I had friends who are office down here. It is a confusing placed entrance. You take away that entrance, I do think you significantly harm the ability to understand how to use this building, number one. Number two, we only have 2.5 entrances per two buildings along the Merle Hay section, and we're talking about even developing that Douglas side. We've got 2 entrances per two building. I don't see this as being significantly, massively different. We're not asking, we've already taken away a ton of driveways. I do bike, but I also do use the Jiffy Lube south of the Douglas, and that is complete wreck down there. I mean, this is so much better. I think we're iteratively improving. I think not allowing this driveway does actually have access to do damage to the ability to use this building in a meaningful way. And again, I see one driveway with two halves. So on those arguments, I would be opposed to taking it away, even though I understand the arguments of the safety piece to a degree. It just doesn't seem to fit right here, and it seems like we've already done enough. I think there is enough here to make this be a reasonable outcome, personally.
Okay, can I take a shot at a motion? So staff recommends denial. I would deny that part, and I would approve, staff recommends approval of the site plan, subject to.
So you would just recommend or move approval of the design alternative? Right. Right.
You want to approve the site plan as the applicant presented it?
Right.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in that, and the last two speakers. It's not, the problem with people not knowing where your second story isn't the curb cuts problem, right? Safety is a problem. I can show you the crash data. It's on the Vision Zero website that this is high risk. Closing curb cuts. Most people don't have 5 curb cuts into their store like you said you have today. Oftentimes there's 1 or maybe 2. I feel strongly that should be closed, and if you have problems with people finding the second floor, it's not because you have obviously they have problems today and you have your middle curb cut. I think closing that curb cut is strongly in favor of the public good, and I would not be able to support that motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. I think closing the curb would do a lot of good, especially if we're putting a sidewalk. And And we just have to rely on people to change their behaviors. We have to force them to think. Can't have lazy drivers just pulling in willy-nilly. Force them to go to the light or force them to go to the share. And then they can come in and cruise slowly through. Yeah, I'd be for closing it. And then I would also petition staff to consider closing other ones further down. They keep bringing up that issue that there is 12, and if they're bringing an equity piece. So if we're going to close this one, we need to make sure going all the way down that we need to close it.
And just to clarify, the only chance staff has to close driveways is through the site plan process. So in this instance, this building had a number of building permits issued that exceeded the 50% value. So that's what triggered the site plan. It's like the city constructing the sidewalk along Merle Hay, that wouldn't be something that triggers elimination of a drive approach. It was the fact that they triggered the need to have a site plan, which gives the city the ability to require the elimination of the drive entry point.
What would, outside of that, what would trigger you guys to be able to do that? Nothing?
No, the city would have to pay the property owners probably for the diminished property value for losing that access.
Not even like a corridor redesign or master plan?
It would be pretty expensive, I believe.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? We have a motion on the table right now to approve the site plan as.
Yeah, I got another comment. So, this sucks. Yeah, if we're not going to do it, Carol, I'm so sorry. If we're not going to do it for the whole site, then I'm now struggling if we're just going to call him out and we're not going to do it for the whole dang city. Okay.
He's only doing it because he's making improvements.
Yeah. But then that's also, all right, now I'm fighting with myself. That's also in the code so the city can make improvements on this area. Is that right, city staff? Like, what was the origin of the code for us to be able to do that, right?
Right. That's why one of the site plan triggers in the code is cumulative permit value, because that's the only way the city will ever incrementally get sites to be brought into compliance with the current code.
Okay, then I'm still for removing it then.
I'm also struggling with this one, Justin, but I'm leaning towards Carol's argument because the city is investing in a sidewalk here already, and so that's significant resources that the city is putting. And the light is not very far. It's not like it's that inconvenient to go to that light. Like, I've been over here a million times, and I go to the light because it's safer anyway. So I'm leaning towards voting against. Thanks.
I agree. I feel strongly in favor of what Carol and the city are recommending, and I don't see that this curb cut we haven't been presented a business case for it. I don't think it improves the wayfinding argument, so I'm planning to vote in opposition to the motion. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to approve the site plan as it is presented, please raise your right hand.
So can I move staff now?
I guess we need to have the vote in opposition. I got the cart
All
before the
those
horse.
opposed, please raise your right hand.
Okay, now motion failed 4-5.
All right, I'd like to propose a new motion to vote along lines of city staff of removing the cut.
Okay, all in favor of Justin's motion to approve the staff recommendation, please raise your right hand. And opposed?
Motion passes 5-4.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 8, which is a request from Larry Kuhl for review and approval of a public hearing site plan, Donna's Garage. I believe we've seen this before for property located at 4424 Southeast 14th and for the following denied type 1 design alternatives A and B, and Nick will present for the city.
Awesome. Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. So talking about driveways again, hopefully everybody's still awake. It's already 8 o'clock. So we're on the south side, it's a little bit different context, so I'll try to walk everybody through that. A lot of similar issues, and then we're also talking about some landscaping stuff too. So as Chair Rodolfo, you referred to, this site plan was before the commission back in October of 2022. So just to even back up even further from that, the reason, just to refresh everybody's memory, the reason this is on staff's radar is back in 2021, and previously historically, the site had been served by a gravel parking lot. That's just how it had operated historically based on all of our records. That's what we had known it as. In 2021, the applicant, they paved over the parking lot without getting applicable site plan, building, right-of-way permits. And so they paved the parking lot, asphalted it over without any permits. Typically, that does require a site plan. So at that time, a code case was opened up. There was some zoning enforcement activity. They were instructed to meet with planning staff, people that are here tonight, talk about, okay, we have to get a site plan in. What does that entail? How do we do that? That sort of thing. And so they've worked with us to get to the point where we went to the commission in October. There was a request at that time to waive the driveway closings that you see here, Part A of the requested design alternatives. At that commission meeting in October, the commission voted to waive one of the driveway closings, so they were allowed to retain one of them, and then also they were required to install requisite landscaping at that time, so it was a few trees along the east side of the property as part of the parking lot buffer. Since that time, the applicant has submitted a revised site plan that maintains the same request to keep the driveways open, and then there's some additional requests regarding further waiving of some of the landscaping requirements. So we'll do a little compare contrast. I'll get to walk through those, and you'll see, okay, hey, what did they propose the first time? How has it changed now? And then what's the staff position? So here's an aerial of the site. This is an aerial, I think it was taken in 2022, so you can see it's at a paved condition now, when this aerial was taken. So it's existed this way for probably a couple of years now. We're over halfway through 2023. The site's on Southeast 14th Street. It's in between McKinley and Watrous, so pretty high volume traffic area. We'll get into some of the numbers a little bit later. These site photos, I got a few, they were taken last October, so you can see the condition of the parking area. This is at the southern view of the site. So the site is situated at the intersection of Southeast 14th Street and Emma Avenue. So this is taken within the Emma Avenue right away. This is Southeast 14th Street, where my cursor is here. This is taken right at the intersection here, Southeast 14th. Here's the applicant's building here, and then here's the parking lot. And then you can see the couple of curb cuts that lead to the drive accesses. And then here's another view from across the intersection. See the couple of driveways here, and then you can kind of see the other one here. So right now, they've got 3 driveways. As staff, we're requesting them to close the 2 that are on Southeast 14th, and then they would retain the one on Emma. That would be our staff recommendation. So we were talking a lot about Vision Zero with the last item. So this is what you would call the high injury network map. So Southeast 14th Street, very similarly to Merle Hay Road, is located on the high injury network, and just as Jillian was talking about, that means that there's an elevated level of crashes compared to other corridors in the city, and then particularly crashes that either kill or cause very severe injuries. So that's why it's identified, and it's these thick black lines here. So the subject site is located approximately where my cursor is. It is located in the middle of one of those high injury networks. This is a little bit more of the zoomed in look at the high injury network. I know it's kind of grainy, it's tough to spot, but it does show some of the crash data in between McKinley, highlighted by my cursor here, and then Watrous up to the north. The red dots represent severe crashes, so those are crashes where there was a death or a severe injury. The black dots are, I don't want to call them regular, but they're crashes that did not result in a severe injury or a death. So you can kind of see they're all throughout the corridor. It's tough to tell because the street lines are black, but there are crashes throughout the corridor. So here's the site plan that the applicant submitted. I'll show a couple sheets of that. Generally just showing existing conditions as well as, and I'll scroll here, some of the modifications to the approaches as well as the sidewalk construction, and then the proposed landscaping that the applicant is proposing for the site. Just for compare-contrast purposes, here's what the applicant proposed to the commission back in October. So you notice there's some more pavement removals, some more vegetation that's proposed, some more trees, things of that nature. So just want to let the commission know this is what you saw back in October, and then this is what the applicant is asking for approval tonight now. So we'll probably have to come back to those images, but just want to fixate on that for a little bit. So digging into the staff report now, I'm not going to necessarily totally rehash a lot of the stuff about drive accesses that we talked about, but just want to reiterate generally, because the parking lot paving does trigger a site plan, the site design ordinance, both Article 2, which talks about building types and general site design, and then also Article 6 of Chapter 135 of City Code, which talks about parking, driveways, drive accesses. Both of those articles of City Code do reference the hierarchy of drives that sites are allowed to have. Generally, all sites, whether new development or redevelopment with a site plan, you're permitted one access off a non-primary street. You're not permitted access off a primary street if you have existing accesses off of an alley or a non-primary street. In this situation, we've got a corner lot. They have an existing access off a non-primary street. We've got one business here. That access is sufficient for all of their needs. And so as staff, as part of the site plan process, we would request that they would close both of the accesses on the primary street, which in this situation is Southeast 14th. So from a code perspective, following the book, that is why it's a design alternative. And now in addition to that, a lot of what we talked about at the last item, thinking about corridor safety, as I mentioned before, Southeast 14th Street is part of that high injury network, and so we do see elevated levels of crashes on this corridor. Corridor access management, thinking about drive access density, is really a proven way to try to reduce some of those numbers. And so closing the two accesses onto Southeast 14th Street is a proven way to try to get some of those numbers down. And then thinking about a lot of the landscaping that we were talking about here. So generally, I think just to even back up a little bit farther, as staff, we understand how this kind of got on our radar. It was kind of an adverse situation, to be really candid about it. The applicant didn't really have an understanding necessarily of just paving a parking lot that would require a permit and a site plan. And as staff, I think we want to be understanding to that situation, and we understand, not everybody is really in tune with all city processes, and so we've tried to work with the applicant a little bit throughout this process of, we understand that, this was brought on you. You didn't necessarily understand what was going on at the time, and so as staff, we want to try to work with the applicant to try to find a solution where we can meet the intent of the ordinance, but also try to achieve some of the goals in terms of accesses and landscaping, things like that. So I do just want to note, especially during that initial site plan review and through now, staff has emphasized that there are some exceptions or waivers or concessions that we can make as part of the site plan review. So I do want to highlight a few of those. Typically, with any sort of parking lot buffer or parking lot vegetation that's required to screen parking lots, I know we talk about this a lot sometimes at the commission, but also those black ornamental fences are typically required. As staff, we've said that's not something that's really necessary as part of the site plan, so we would be open to waiving that, and a landscape buffer would be appropriate in that scenario. So that is something that staff has considered. Additionally, typically, when you have site plans, there's a couple sets of trees that are required along perimeters of sites. We have what are called street trees, which those are the trees that sit in the right-of-way. So typically, those are in between the sidewalk and the back of the curb. With this site, we know it's a state highway. There's a lot of vision clearance issues. It's really not necessarily feasible or safe, really, to place street trees, so trees in between the sidewalk and the back of the curb. And so as staff, we opted to waive that requirement. We have allowed the applicant to instead plant overstory trees in what we call the parking lot or the fence frontage buffer area, and that would be behind the walk, and just place them at a distance where they would mimic street tree provision. So really, from staff perspective, we're requiring about half of the trees along the perimeter of the site facing the public right-of-way. And then additionally, we have allowed the applicant to utilize an alternate trash enclosure design. So I know we've talked about trash enclosures at the commission before. Typically, enclosures are required to have a masonry cover that would match the building. The building is brick. As staff, we have allowed the applicant to utilize a composite wood or a metal panel, which does result in some substantial cost savings. And so we've recognized that. We think that meets the letter and the intent of the code. And then regarding the interior parking lot landscaping, there are certain prescriptions in the landscaping ordinance that require landscape islands to be placed every 8 spaces, or if you have what are called terminal, parking lot rows that have terminal ends that don't really abut up against a building or a property line. If they're freestanding rows or bays of parking, typically you're required to have these what are called terminal islands that kind of cap the ends and then would have trees in those. As staff, we haven't really been super prescriptive and have tried to work with the applicant to try to adopt something a little bit more creative, where maybe you don't have to install the islands, quote unquote, per code in terms of their location and sizing, but if you can creatively space trees and minimize your pavement loss so we can still get some tree canopy in the parking lot, to adopt some of the shading requirements that are prescribed in the ordinance, that would be acceptable to staff. So really kind of flexibly giving them the ability to landscape the parking lot and provide shading in the way that would work best for them. So going off of that, thinking about all the items that staff has considered and would consider waiving in this instance, really the baseline that staff would consider in terms of a landscape plan to be developed would be, one, removing some of that pavement, so establishing a paving setback so the right-of-way area is reverted to a pervious or an unpaved condition, and then that pervious condition would extend into the site. And so we don't have the potential for vehicles or things to butt up into the right-of-way. And so there's a green buffer area between where pedestrians are walking and then into the site. And so that's something that staff, we feel strongly that should be established as part of this. And then additionally, some sort of row of ornamental grasses or shrubs to accomplish the intent of the parking lot screening requirement, sans the fence, as I talked about earlier, and then trees that are planted every 30 feet to try to mimic street tree provision. And then additionally, like I said before, some sort of interior parking lot planting scheme where maybe you're not prescriptively meeting the you got to have an island every 8 spaces requirement, but generally planting trees adjacent to and in the interior of the parking lot that would help meet the shading requirements of the ordinance. So all those things into consideration, staff is recommending denial of both of the design alternatives. Hopefully we could come up with a solution on both the driveways and then as well as the landscaping that works for the applicant. So that is my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions now.
When we saw this before, wasn't there an issue with truck operations, which is one of the reasons we wanted 2 ins and outs for circulation?
I'll let the applicant speak to that. I have not received any sort of truck turning diagrams or anything to analyze that. So if the applicant can provide that information tonight, that's certainly up under the purview of the commission to consider, but that's not something that I analyzed before we had this meeting tonight.
But when the commission heard it before, the commission only allowed one of the 2 driveways to remain. The commission required one of the 2 to be eliminated, but at this time they're asking for both to be retained.
Are we requiring the driveway, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carol.
Please.
Are we requiring the driveway to be striped?
That has not been a criteria or a comment from Traffic and Transportation Division. Could you describe what you mean by striped?
Well, today it's just like one big solid piece of asphalt, and normally in a parking lot you have like stripes so you know where to park.
Oh, yes, sorry. I thought you were referring to the driveway specifically. The parking lot, yes, is required to be striped. So that,
Okay.
yeah. So I know what you mean. Today it's just
Yeah.
free flowing a little bit. So this would be the striping plan that they have proposed. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Todd?
Why are we seeing this again?
So the applicant at the time, and I'll let the applicant speak maybe in a little bit more detail. So this went to the commission in October. The applicant, as many of you know, if you don't necessarily agree with the ruling of the commission, you can appeal to city council. The applicant missed that window to appeal and so has since resubmitted and has requested additional relief. So they wanted to come back to the commission to see what you guys would say about the driveways again. Maybe they could change your mind, and then also appeal some additional landscaping requirements. I feel like, I'll let the applicant speak to it again. If they aren't necessarily happy with the commission's ruling, they'll likely appeal to city council, as they have the right to.
But if they miss the appeal to city council, are we going to see this again? Until?
They can. I mean, they can resubmit. They have to pay the fees again, and we review it again, and yeah.
All right, let's hear from the applicant.
Sure.
It's pretty aggravating that, we're seeing this again and again. So, appeal it to council, it's taken a lot of time. So, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thanks, Nick. You've got, oh, sorry, was there a question? No. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, you've got 10 minutes.
Again, good evening. Wally Peltz Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. I have answers to all of your questions. You asked why we're back here again. We begged for contractors to bid this. owners who are here, this is into an estate. They're looking to sell it to the property owner who operates the bar, or the owner of the establishment that operates it. And as part of the deal, they asked that the parking lot get improved. In our previous session, I proved with GIS ISU that the paving was paved. I have a DOT strip map that shows the parking lot was paved, just deteriorated. They filled potholes with gravel. It happens. It's a part of the cycle with low maintenance, right? So they've inherited this. They're trying to get it off the books. We then, by the time we got this first bid, they're like, we can't afford that. It's not even in the estate to cover it. They've already spent $47,000 improving the paving, which they thought was a good thing, right? And it's an overlay project. This project came forward because they were cited with a violation of paving when it shouldn't. There's some legal steps in there. So, but we're not going to step into that. We then approached the council member of this ward. Council member told us to come back to planning and zoning, present it again, and if we get denial, then asked that we bring it to council to present it. So that is how we got where we're at. So I apologize if we're wasting your time. That's not our intent. If you feel so, you should all be familiar with it. If you want to deny it, please do so. We will shorten this, session. I don't need to answer any questions. Vote it down, and we will move on as we've been instructed by our council member.
Question. Who was the council member?
Mr. Gata.
And he's aware and as well as his other?
Correct. We walked him through the whole process.
Okay. How do they feel about it?
He was actually supportive. He understands Donna's Garage has been in a South Side staple for many, many years. I also did go through the traffic counts. My clients were willing to try and comply with what it came through at, but I submitted it. You got a copy of the proposal. It's $72,000. It doesn't even include the trash enclosure. That's for a $104,000 assessed building, and we've already spent $47,000. We're getting upside down, and they're trying to sell it. Does that make it? It's in an estate, so we're trying to close out the estate. So that's why we approached Councilman Gatto. He indicated, "Hey, bring it here, see if they'll approve it. If not, bring it to council and show your case." I know we're in a high-intensity corridor, but we did do that ICAT study that the DOT has, that software. This is not a high-impact area. It's north and south of us. We are not seeing a lot of accidents here. Second item, it is known as the biker bar, per se. So in attendance, 25 to 40, but it's usually in the evenings, usually after rush hour traffic. So again, we're just asking if you are so inclined, and I am not arguing one way or the other, we're just something to do. So if you would have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
On your landscaping notes, number 7, it says that washed stone would be an opportunity for the landscaping. Are you familiar with that is not allowed as far as city code?
Washed river rock stone is not?
No. Not that I'm aware of, right? We don't allow rocks?
Okay. Well, we can certainly change that.
Okay. And the current, in looking at, currently there's like the sign, the pole sign, like that's a legendary sign. And then behind that, you're showing now, if you can go to the go-to position, you're showing that you're putting the handicap spot north of that, where today it's on the pole sign, right?
Correct, but it's a non-compliant ADA. So
right.
We're trying to bring what we can into compliance.
Okay. So I rode by there yesterday, and there were 2 traffic cones in the northernmost curb cut. Do you know why that they would be there, sort of discouraging people from using it?
I have no idea.
Okay. And
Can I answer that?
You'll have 5 minutes after Wally's presentation.
And then, so will you, so you sort of, the existing sign is there, but then there's also a big old pole, right? So are you proposing just one spot then behind that versus today it's kind of a free-for-all without striping and stuff as far as where you're going to allow people to park?
Yeah, the parking is presented on that lower southern portion. Besides the one accessible space that we're required to provide.
Oh, okay, so that's just going to be the one space up there. Okay,
That's a loading zone next to it.
okay, thank you.
Can I make sure I understand something what you're saying? So basically, we basically just got a dive bar here. We accidentally, took an action that cost us to get reviewed, and you're just trying to sell it right now, or what's, I guess, I don't understand the selling piece. You're just saying, hey, we just want to get this through enough of this so we can get the thing sold and get.
As a part of the contingency, from my understanding from the purchase offer, is that they wanted the parking area improved. So it had deteriorated over the multiple years. I mean, I think it's been here since 1950 is the latest aerial I could find from the GIS. It shows it paved. We confirmed that with the DOT strip map for the improvement when they widened East 14th into the 4-lane that it is with the divided medians. It also identifies in Donna's garage asphalt parking lot across the whole portion. The violation was that it was paved, we quote unquote paved without permission, which then we tried to go compliant with the site plan, went through all those steps. We again proved that we're not even sure there was a violation, but I am certain that they've paved more than was allowed. However, we went through it. We're trying to get them compliant. However, there is not enough funds to do so that other plan that you approved, we ran it, finally got a bid in April. I was begging people to bid it. I got one bid. Tried my small contractors, my big ones, and Elder Corporation did finally bid it for us on April 3rd. And I can share it. I mean, staff has it. And when we saw that, we're like, they can't afford that. Right? It's in the trying to remember the legal term. Their mom passed away, so that they're looking. It's in the estate, right? So the estate, they're trying to close out that through probate, correct? And so we're just trying to get to the end of it. They tried to do the right thing. We've tried to do the right thing. This thing's just. You're going to spend 125 grand to sell something for 100. It's.
So is post-sale the intent of the sale to actually use it the same way it is now, or is it to change it?
It's a lease property, so the current owner of the operation has ran it for many years, and he has leased this property. The children of the deceased are no longer wanting to own it or deal with the property, so they offered to sell it to them. The current operator. And they might be able to explain more of the legal stuff that's behind it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, is there a mechanism that we can actually, if this goes through as it is there going to be something that occurs that's going to require someone else to absorb the cost later in order to actually just allow the thing to move forward? Or we're saying that's, if we approve this, theoretically, it now actually stays as this in the future? I guess that's my thinking of what I'm trying to understand.
The recommendation was to do by Councilman Gatto because it's, he saw the evidence of the aerials of the asphalt, of the highway strip map that shows it asphalt, he's like, so why is it a violation? We said, we don't understand it either, but that was the explanation we got. They were told by the contractor who paved it, hey, it's under 10,000 square feet, you don't need to do anything. And then it just kind of became a slow roll. We worked with staff, like you guys know, we love to work with staff. Our previous plan has no comments and we're approved, right? But in this condition, I think this is again, a very unique condition that I don't think things were It's not staff, I think it's that violation that was brought from zoning, which I think was an error. We have talked to legal counsel, and they said, well, yeah, if you can prove it was paid before and it's just a recapping project, why is it a zoning violation? It doesn't make any sense.
I'm gonna chime in. All right, so this sounds like an equity issue. I think this is very much an outlier. I appreciate all the context. Could we be able to hear the concerns of the applicant? And then I'm ready to make a motion right after that.
Well, we have to go through the whole process, but we'll get.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I just want to hear I want to hear their context.
Any other questions for Wally?
Wally, thank you.
Okay. Folks in support of the item, please come forward. Yep. State your name and address, please, and sign in on that white piece of paper when you're finished. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Mike Brooks. I live at 8126 Crestview Drive, Des Moines, Iowa, 50320. As regards to asking about the traffic cones, that's all I'm going to address. We have the 2 traffic cones there. If you look on the buildings, there's 2 signs that say motorcycle parking only. And once we get that handicap stall in, the rest of that and that driveway only will be used for motorcycle parking only. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in support of this item? Anyone opposed or neutral? Okay, I will close the public hearing then and ask for
So
comments and motions.
I'll jump right into it. I don't feel comfortable having them take all this added cost in this process. This seems like something that City Council needs to address. It sounds like they already are aware of it. So I'm willing to deny and send it on up to them because it just seems like an equity piece to me. Yeah.
Do you mean like, so you would move staff, which is denial, and then it would go to city council?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think that's the logical way to go.
The applicants, are you guys familiar with what we're stating? That we're just going to send it up to city council? Okay.
And if I can do one more clarification, I again want to apologize for having it to bring it back to you, but we were unaware of that large cost, right? Because staff worked great with us. They reduced this, reduced that. We were working well, and then just the number just shocked us. So I appreciate your listening to our case. Thank you.
What's the 10,000 square foot rule? I'm sorry. What is that referencing?
I know it, but I'm going to let you cite it.
While he's talking about stormwater management, so whenever you add 10,000 square feet of new impervious area, it triggers certain stormwater management requirements. So this site did not add 10,000 new square feet of impervious area, so there was no stormwater management that was required with the site plan.
Okay, so now I'm sorry.
Like they didn't.
I'm a Todd now, so I'm trying to figure out. So basically, we got a sanction when apparently the city did the math wrong. We didn't actually hit the violation threshold. We're still in violation.
So I'll try to clarify here. So they still had to do a site plan. Not all the site plans that you guys see are required to do formal stormwater management. So the townhomes project that we saw earlier, they were adding over 10,000 new square feet of impervious surface area. So they had to do a site plan, but they also had to submit a formal stormwater management report that described drainage and how they were going to detain and flows and things like that. This site, they were doing some paving. They did hit the threshold for requiring a site plan. So they do have to submit a site plan, show landscaping, come into compliance with those codes. But the new square footage of paving was not 10,000 square feet, so they did not have to do formal stormwater management. So submit a signed stormwater management report. We weren't analyzing calcs of flows or anything like that. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve staff recommendation. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Those opposed?
It's pass.
Pass.
Motion carries 8 to 0 to 1.
Item number 9 is a request from One Site Development for review and approval of a public hearing site plan Dollar Tree Southeast 14th for property located at 6025 Southeast 14th and for design, type 2 design alternatives A through C, and Nick will also present this item.
Cool. Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. Sticking on the south side, so a little bit farther down the corridor here. I'll try to keep it relatively brief. All the design alternatives that we're looking at today really involve building siting and placement, so we're not talking about any of the design on the building or the landscape or anything like that. The applicant has been compliant with all of those things. It's really where the building is being placed, and so all the relief that you see up here on the screen, it really relates to that. So here's an aerial of the site here. This is a larger site, so I don't know if people are familiar, and I've got a larger one coming up on the next slide, but this is a large site. It's where the new Olive Garden has gone in. There's a self-storage place there. We're about a quarter to a half a mile north of Army Post on Southeast 14th, if you can visualize where that is. And currently, the applicant, they've actually just completed a plat of survey to subdivide this land. So this is a large chunk of land, and it's in the process of undergoing subdivisions to parcel out specific pieces of land for what we call pad-style development. If you read your staff report, there was a brief description on what that is. So that's what's going on here. This is a larger zoomed-out aerial. Where my cursor is here and where this new parcel line is shown here, this is that Olive Garden site. So this aerial was actually taken a couple months ago in March. So this Olive Garden is now open and operational. But generally, it just shows you a zoomed-out view of the larger site context. So this, if you could follow my cursor here, is really this larger site. And like I said before, the larger landowner here, land developer, is in the process of subdividing a lot of this, so new pad-style sites can develop. Here's some just street view imagery. These were taken last night. So this is looking across the street. So this is standing on Southeast 14th Street in front of the Chase Bank property, looking across the way. This is the existing Dollar Tree store that's here, and upon completion of this, they would move into this building. Here's just another view on the other side of Southeast 14th Street. So right here where my cursor is generally where the building would go, approximately. Just shows generally what's going on at the rest of the site as of this moment. And then here's another view just looking north. So the new building would be located approximately here. Just here's some overviews of the site here. I'll try to walk through some of the highlights. So here's the building, about 10,000 square feet. They've got an existing drive aisle. It's not theirs. They do have an access easement to utilize it though. Loading would take place in the back. They've got 3 rows of parking here in the front. Here's a landscaping plan. Generally shows how they're landscaping the site. Like I said before, it is compliant with what we would require. Some views of the building. All right, so digging into the staff report here. I think generally, and if you read your report, you understand that staff generally acknowledges that this is a really tough corridor to develop in. We understand it is really auto-dominated. And to meet the prescriptions of the ordinance that require a building to be pushed pretty much all the way up to the property line and parking located in the rear, it's not really consistent contextually, and just due to a lot of market forces, it's not really realistic to ask applicants to do that with the street that we have here and the surrounding built environment context. And so regarding the design alternatives for parking in front of the building, the build-to zone, as well as the primary frontage coverage, I think we understand that they're not going to prescriptively meet the quote-unquote letter of the code. So staff, we want to acknowledge that. We want to acknowledge that what is proposed is incrementally, it definitely is an improvement. However, as I was mentioning before, and I'll go back to the aerial here, the larger one, this site has actually seen a pretty good bit of development activity recently. So the Chase Bank actually was just relatively redeveloped in the last couple of years, so they did some site improvements, reoccupied the building. We do have a new car wash down here. This is a Take 5 car wash that is under construction currently. The Olive Garden project, like I mentioned here. There also is a Cane's restaurant that's proposed approximately here. It's not something that we have in for site plan yet, but it's something that staff has talked about with the land developer. And then this Dollar Tree here. So within a corridor that hasn't necessarily seen a lot of new construction recently, there is a good amount of activity happening. And so as staff, we want to acknowledge that. And really what we were thinking about here is a lot of with the new constructions and the new developments that are proposed along this specific portion of the corridor and the larger site that I was talking about earlier, they've really had kind of a rhythmic or more of a set built environment context than the hodgepodge of stuff that you see along Southeast 14th Street today. And generally, the new developments that are proposed along this portion of the corridor are about 100 feet off the property line. what the applicant is proposing, they're proposing a building that's set further back, about 148. And as staff, we understand this is generally an auto-dominated corridor, but at the same time, we do feel it is important to establish a rhythmic, physical, and aesthetic consistency along the corridor. It does foster what you would call a sense of place, which means kind of creating somewhat of a neighborhood feel and identity, and just generally a positive physical compactness that we think aesthetically, as well as physically, for people that aren't necessarily driving, does actually improve the corridor. There is actually tangible value in that. And so, as staff, we understand the need to request relief from not meeting the build-to zone requirement of 0 to 15 feet from the front property line, but acknowledging the other developments that have taken place and the ones that are going to be proposed, we would like to ask the applicant to set the building about 100 feet back from the front property line instead of the 148 that they're proposing. So generally, we're recommending approval of the request subject to that. Really, condition 1 is really the one that I want to highlight here. And we also acknowledge, too, that would change the site design a little bit of what's proposed. They'd lose a row of parking in front, but there are other areas on the site where they could maybe relocate that parking. Or, as staff, as we understand, there's a lot of parking in this area, so if they had to lose a few stalls out there in the front, as staff, we don't think it would be detrimental necessarily, and I'll let the applicant speak to that a little bit. So that is my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
So Nick, are you saying that it'll line up with Olive Garden?
Correct. So yeah, good point. So Olive Garden was approved with a setback of 96 feet.
Okay.
For reference. And then that Canes that I was talking about earlier, again, it's conceptual. We don't have any plans in. They have proposed a similar setback of approximately 100 feet. And so we're trying to stay in that neighborhood with this recommendation.
Is the logic of, so what you're saying there is, though, if we get further development, everyone would be open to the idea that we are sharing community parking there as opposed to actually being strict adhering to the parking minimums later? Because right now you're saying we're going to cut out a row. Does that mean we're expecting to say, oh, we will be sharing our parking requirements?
It's not the only expectation. It's an option for the applicant. So basically, as part of the, I guess what you would call a design alternative, as staff, we would approve some parking in the front with giving the applicant the opportunity to maybe share parking with adjacent users, as well as being able to redesign their site. They could add more parking along the side of the building or potentially in the rear. So they've got a few stalls here. They're not proposing to utilize any of this area as parking. So if they shifted the building up, they can maybe shift some of these stalls here. I know this is a loading area back here. They can maybe add a few stalls here. Basically what we're trying to say is that we think that there's options. If they lose a row of stalls in front, we think that there's options for them to fulfill their parking needs.
Nick, can you pull up that 2 slides before that, please? And thank you.
This one?
No, it was the aerial.
Oh.
And they're in agreement with this?
No, they are not.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
not.
that's why it's not on consent.
Oh, okay, I was confused, okay.
I think it's actually,
one more?
Yeah, there we go. So that layout is where it's at, and then the extra additional parking stalls will be where the current Dollar General is at right now?
Potentially. We're not in an exercise of designing the site for them.
Yep.
I think they're presenting their request, and then based on the commission's ruling, we can work with them, after this meeting to walk through some of the site design specifics. Okay. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there another aerial blueprint of their current layout that they were showing?
The site plan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's on slide 8? Sorry. Go up and one more.
One more?
Yes, sir.
Or down?
Down, yeah, sorry.
You want to see the landscape
Yeah, there we
plan?
go. That's
Yeah,
the one.
this one might be a little clearer. Yeah, so just to highlight this again, got the building here, got 3 rows of parking, got some parking on the side, is what's proposed now. As staff, we basically want them to scooch this up about 50 feet or so, approximately.
Okay. So
Just
essentially,
to get it in line with the other new developments. That's the basis of our recommendation.
All right, sweet. Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Isn't it an exception as well to have parking in the front?
Yes, that is one of the items, yeah. So I'll go back. I kind of glossed over that, I apologize. So there's 3 design alternatives. One of them is the building placement. The other one is what you call building coverage. So because the building is outside of the build-to zone, it doesn't meet the coverage. And then the third one is for parking located in the front. That's part C.
Right. So I think city staff would be comfortable with the look and feel of the Olive Garden placement and parking
Correct.
and landscaping. I don't know. I think you have a picture of that.
Mm-hmm. You can kind of see
Which
it.
has parking, like some on the front, but some on the side, and maybe some in the back as
Yeah,
well?
exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Is the applicant present? Please state your name and address. You have 10 minutes and sign in when you're finished.
All right. I sat here a long time to get to speak to you people, so I can see you people. What's that? Yeah. So my name is Jeff Stickford from Waterloo, Iowa. So I'll be driving home after this. At this point in the meeting, I think it'd be good just to lighten things up a little bit. Every time I introduce myself, I go back to the movie Jump Street 22, and Channing Tatum's in the back of the semi. And he's supposed to be speaking Spanish, and he comes out and he says, "My name is Jeff," but in Spanish. My wife loses her mind every time I say that. But anyway, moving on to the matter at hand. So really, we're down to parking. Worked very closely with Nick here for the last 3 months and through several rounds of site plans and trying to meet that happy medium between meeting the city code and making sure the tenant is happy. So I'm a preferred developer for Dollar Tree. I've done 24 of these projects in the state of Iowa and have never ventured outside. Really, our only item to talk about is this 48-foot difference between staff recommendation and what the tenant wants. And so I'm dancing this fine line of how do I make them happy and get a yes. So I'd point out a few things. Having built a number of these projects, and on this site plan, by shifting the building forward 50 feet, we lose one drive aisle, but we really lose half of our parking. So we don't just lose a row of parking, we lose both sides of that drive aisle. 63 feet is required for a drive aisle and parking stalls on either side of that. So moving to 100 feet really takes away 50% of our parking. More importantly, and the driving factor for not going to consent tonight is the fact that the tenant requires circulation. So if you can imagine somebody's coming northbound on Southeast 14th Street, takes a right, and we have a single drive aisle, and there's no room for alternate parking because of the size of the building, we would have potentially somebody trying to back out of a parking stall, and we're going to have somebody sitting in that driveway waiting for them to clear so we can pull a car in. By creating this circulation, and this is a requirement from our tenant here, that they have multiple points for cars to get in and out because of the number of trips made to this store. I think it's interesting. Statistically, there will be 208,000 visitors to this store in one calendar year. So you can imagine the number of people in and out where the average consumer spends less than 15 minutes in the store. We feel like we really utilized the maximum we could on this space. It's a smallish site for the size of the building, which gave us no alternative to create additional circulation by either bringing cars around or behind this site to give us an option to help drive this traffic. The other driving factor for our tenant here is their process for unloading the product. They're very big on secured rear entrances. There's no public accesses to the rear of this building. So parking in the rear of the building would certainly take away any consumer side. You could potentially make it an employee parking lot, but they have heavy theft concern from the back of their building because you can carry crates of product out, not just a single $1 item. Well, $1.25 now, but anyway. Overall, this store is about 3 miles away from the one to the north of it, but certainly is a higher volume, so the tenant is much inclined to try to keep this particular space operational. I think that's about it. I think this is a good project for the city. We are close, but I do want to point out that the tenant was unwilling to bend when I did hear from Nick about wanting to move to 100 feet. They just said they could not entertain a single drive aisle. They felt like their consumer would be trapped in that and would certainly drive sales away from their business. And they have 19,000 stores that fit this model, and so I'm pretty confident in their analysis. Any questions for me?
Have you considered solar panels for your flat roof?
I have not.
Because there's big tax credits, especially for businesses, and then you can write it down over 5 years.
That would be awesome.
But you have not.
I'm the middleman here. I would point that out. I would consider myself a professional developer. I've been doing this for 22 years. Started very young, but I am told what I'm going to do by this particular tenant, and they're a good company to work for, great company to work for, but that's not a decision I can make.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor?
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
mean, is there a reason if, given all the extra space that's around here, you're talking about, you don't just have circulation for days. I mean, you probably have cars doing donuts here constantly, right? I mean, it seems like your objective of having people be able to actually park safely with all kinds of circulation enter the store, as of right now, is going to be achieved by a mile. And if the city is actually pursuing a strategy of shared parking later anyway, don't we hit the requirement that your tenant needs? I mean, even you could, in that case, even to shift the building up and keep the back where it is, and you have areas of parking with circulation access here in the whole rest of this parking lot.
I would not disagree with that. I would tell you Dollar Tree likes to have their parking lot with their consumer, and there's a specific number of steps this consumer is willing to walk to the front door to shop here. And they perform this. I can't give you that data because I don't have that, but I can tell you they have indicated this to me. They want their people to be able to park in front of the door within 30 steps of the front door. This is how they compete with the big box to the north of them. And it's relative to the number of space. So if we have to park half of this parking lot in the back of the building, they maintain that consumer will go to an alternate location. So if the parking lot went in with a single row, you'd have to drive in, park in a spot, back up, and drive out the same one. That is the circulation they're responding to. They feel like that dead end prohibits people from pulling in because it's difficult. It's more difficult to get to a spot when there's 12 options and only one driveway in and out off of the access.
No, but there's also like 8,000 spots, just 90 degrees over. Sorry, 8,000. I'm not, again, no math. I'm just saying, just a whole lot of other ones. Right?
Yeah, I certainly hear the thought process. But again, this is what they've dictated to me and said this is what we need in order to do this project.
Understood. Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you. I think I asked for anyone in favor of the item to speak. Is there anyone opposed or neutral? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and ask for comments and motions.
I'll move staff.
Any discussion on Carol's motion?
I'm sorry, just to be clear, so moving staff looking at just means that we would require that the building be at 100 foot back, and then that would require rejigging of the parking lot, right?
Correct.
Okay. Just as a quick nod to staff on this, I hope the strategy of being able to like look at shared parking and then in the future, this is hugely, hugely positive, be awesome in whole kinds of other places, especially our Ingersoll issues and others. So like this is really, really, it seems like a good adoption of a very good strategy. I hope we carry forward.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, and it's a good area to test it on because there's a lot of parking options. So, yeah, I'm in favor of your motion, Carol.
Okay, let's vote on the motion. Everyone in favor of the motion on the table, please raise your right hand.
All right, motion passes 9-0.
Item number 10, request from Tiger Knight for review and approval of a public hearing site plan 1210 Army Post Road for property located at Saman for the following Type 2 design alternatives A and B that Nick will present.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. So just to back up, so tonight we're looking at a site plan. The commission and people that maybe are involved with the city are probably well aware of this property. There's been a lot of zoning action here. And so the last time the commission saw this was in May of 2022. The applicant attempted to rezone the property to allow a vehicle upholstery use. So there was, you might remember at the time, there was a big debate on what uses were allowed here, what wasn't allowed here, what's classified as vehicle repair, things like that. So that was a debate that happened last year. They attempted to get that at city council. That was denied. And so basically we reverted back to older rezoning conditions from 2020. One of those conditions required a site plan. And so that through that time, the applicant has been working with us, and that's the submission that's before us tonight, is the site plan that's required per those zoning conditions. There is still active zoning enforcement at the property. As long as the applicant is continuing to work with us on the site plan piece, the building permit piece, we basically hold or stay that enforcement. And so basically there's communication between the applicant and us of zoning enforcement activities, working through the site plan with the applicant and their consultants that are here tonight. And so that has led us to this point. The reason that we're at the commission for this site plan is for the two items that are up there on the screen. There's a couple elements of the building design that aren't necessarily compliant with city code. They're asking for relief of those items. As staff, we're supportive, and I'll explain why. They're really the crux of it is they're proposing a building modification to add an overhead door. And as part of that addition to that overhead door, they're going to take out some windows. And so the building already doesn't have a ton of windows, and look at the street view, you'll see that. And so they're reducing that transparency even more, which is not allowed. You're not allowed to reduce street-facing transparency. So that's the first design alternative that they're seeking. And then overhead doors are not permitted on a primary frontage facade. And so there's only one frontage here. It's Army Post. That's considered the primary frontage. So you can't add any overhead doors. So I'll walk through the report and recommendation. So here's the site now. Everybody's probably relatively familiar with it. This is on Army Post. We're about a third of a mile east of Fleur and about a quarter mile west of Southwest 9th. So in between Southwest 9th and Fleur on Army Post Road on the south side. Really kind of a diverse commercial corridor through here. Here's an image of the site. This was taken last night. So I'll just highlight this and we'll look at the elevations too. Generally, if you can follow my cursor, this is where the overhead door would go, and these are the windows that would be removed. You can see there's already other overhead doors that do exist on the building. Dig into the site plan here. Generally, this view shows some of the pavement removals that are proposed. And here's the landscaping plan that shows compliance with the Chapter 135 standards, establishing a paving setback, street trees, buffer trees, some of the interior parking lot landscaping, and then the side and rear buffering as well. Here's the building elevations. So this is where that new overhead door is proposed right here. So if we go back to the street view, there's a set of windows that are here. And so those are going away. And that's where the new overhead door is going. As part of the building and site improvements, the applicant is proposing to actually pretty substantially change the exterior facades of the building, at least on the front. So this brown band here, this is brick that's proposed. And then this kind of limeish color here is stucco. And then also the applicant is proposing some screening for the rooftop mechanical units that are either existing and are proposed on the building. And so as staff, part of our analysis was we think that really the building aesthetically is going to be improved a lot. And so with the existing condition of already having a lot of overhead doors, there's already not a lot of transparency. As the staff position was, we don't think the request really, quote unquote, worsens the condition of the building, particularly with the facade improvements. And so we recommend approval. Now, at the same time, in our recommendation, we do acknowledge some of the zoning enforcement issues that have taken place at this property, and so we decided to set a sunset date on here for when the improvements would be completed by. The applicant has agreed with our recommendation. So that's why the item, they were amenable to it being moved to consent earlier. So that's my presentation. I'll take any questions on it.
Can you go to the elevation, the front elevation?
Sure.
There's 3 doors existing, and you say they're going to add 1 door?
Correct.
What is that door on the extreme right?
Yeah, so that is also existing. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because it's set back So my photo, I was trying to take photos of it yesterday, and I probably should have taken or included another one in my presentation, but the building is so long, it's really hard to see. So see this here?
Is it door number 8?
I believe so. Are you on Street View right now?
No, I'm looking at a picture of it.
Okay. It's right, if you can look at it, it's where this little inset is here.
Oh.
So there's a loading dock, and it kind of goes below, and it's hidden behind the rest of the facade.
So there's currently 4 doors, and you
Correct.
want to go to 5?
They would be adding a 5th, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's not 3 to 4, it's 4 to 5?
Correct.
And, okay, that was my biggest question, because I was very confused.
Sure.
When I would look at those elevations, and I would sit in front of the building, and I would count the doors.
Yes.
And I would look at the elevation, and there would still be 5 there, and you kept saying you were going to add 1.
Sure.
So, and I appreciate that a professional has been hired by the owner, because there has been a lot of city staff and this commission's time spent on getting to this point. I was very excited to ride by the facility yesterday and see workers working on it. So that is all positive. And my big question was, why are there 5 doors on the elevation when there should only be 4? So.
Cool.
I'm glad that they're working on it. Thank you, sir.
Me too.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Nick. Applicant, you've got 10 minutes if you'd like it. Please state your name and address and sign in when you're finished.
I'll have to hurry, it's almost my bedtime. Ed Arp, Civil
too.
Engineering Consultants, 2400 86th Street in Urbandale, representing Tiger Knight. Barry Nelson, the owner, couldn't be present tonight, he's away on business, but I think we finally have this kind of figured out. I've been working on this for 6 years, and through very many iterations and attempts, it's one of those deals where it's a difficult building because it was industrial in nature, and to try to retrofit that is not easy. And to find users that fit that building has not been easy, but I think we're getting there now. I really don't have, Nick did a fine job presenting. I'd just be happy to answer any questions. I think we finally have it put together.
So is the upholsterer in there?
No, he went out of business.
Oh, okay.
In fact, just about every user he's had since he bought the building about 8 years ago, and pretty much every user's had to go away because it didn't fit the classification.
Yeah, I think once you sex it up, I think it will really have a big impact on the people that
Yeah,
are.
I mean, just knowing what the sites looked like since he bought it. I mean, he's been working on it. He remodeled the back, but nobody sees that. So it's been one of those weird projects where there's been improvements made, but not that you could appreciate from driving by, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. I think I can safely close the public hearing and ask for motions and discussion. Emily Webb.
I will move staff.
Any discussion on the motion? Let's go ahead and vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any committee or directors reports?
I'm just going to quickly mention that the next meeting on August 3rd, we will have a 5:30 session on the draft of the new historic preservation plan, Reflect DSM, and then also on either a meeting, the second meeting in September or a meeting in October, we're going to have a presentation from the engineering department on the Vision Zero plan that we've heard talked about a few times now. So
Very good.
look forward to that. That's all.
Entertain a motion to adjourn? Do we vote on that? Thank you.